Welcome back. This is a place for quiet stories from the wizarding world, the paths canon never walked, the choices that might have changed everything. Here, we take a single moment and turn it slightly. We follow the consequences slowly, carefully, year by year. If you enjoy these long, immersive journeys into alternate magic, consider subscribing and settling in. Now, let's start. The house is sleeping, but nothing in number 12 Grimmauld Place ever truly rests. It's past midnight, and in the deepest room of the darkest house in London, a 12-year-old girl is still awake. Hermione Black sits alone in the library, surrounded by walls that remember every curse ever cast in anger. Candles gutter in their brackets, dripping wax onto dragonhide armrests. Dust hangs in the air like a second curtain. The portraits of long-dead Blacks lean in their frames, whispering about blood and betrayal, while she does the most dangerous thing a Black can do. She reads a Muggle book. It's small, battered, and utterly out of place among the leather-bound grimoires. A children's science text, pinched from a second-hand shop off Charing Cross Road, hidden under her robes all the way home. On the page, diagrams of atoms and planets. Above her, the heavy rustle of painted silk as an ancestor shifts, offended by the very shape of the letters. "Remember this child," hisses a voice from a nearby frame, thin as a knife being drawn. Phineas Nigellus, or maybe one of the nameless great aunts whose eyes never quite look away. A Black who questions blood is no Black at all. Hermione's quill stills. Her shoulders go rigid for a heartbeat. The house wins. Then she turns the page, quietly, stubbornly. Because if the world is as small and simple as this family insists, why does everything feel so wrong? What if the brightest witch of her age didn't grow up in a warm Muggle home with dentists and holiday homework, but in the coldest pure-blood dynasty in Britain? What if Hermione wasn't the outsider walking into Diagon Alley in awe, but the heiress everyone already knew by name? What does brightest witch mean when the darkness is coming from inside her own house? This isn't a story about an easy role swap or putting Hermione in Slytherin robes for the aesthetic. This changes everything. Growing up Black means growing up on stories where Muggle-borns are mud, where family trees are battlefields, where love is measured in obedience and the right kind of hatred. It means she's praised for perfect wand work and perfect posture in the same breath. The library smells of old smoke and older magic. On the far wall, the Black family tapestry pulses faintly, threads humming with generations of ugly pride. Hermione can feel that hum in her bones. There's a thrill in it, if she's honest, a fierce pride in her power, in the way spells leap to her hand, as if they've been waiting centuries to be used properly again. But because she's Hermione, there's also the itch of unease every time Wahlberger's shrieking portrait praises purity loud enough to rattle the windows. She closes the Muggle book and crosses to the tapestry. Her name is there now, freshly embroidered in silver thread. Hermione Arcturia Black. A delicate flourish tying her to parents, cousins, expectations. Her fingertip traces the letters, feeling the magic buzz beneath the woven surface. Then she follows a branching line up and out, to a charred hole torn through the fabric. Sirius Black, blasted into absence. The thread ends in ash. Hermione's hand hovers between her own name and his, between the bright, clean curve of new embroidery and the scorched scar of defiance. In one direction, the perfect Black daughter, weapon and heir. In the other, the family disgrace who chose a different life and paid for it. In this timeline, standing in this house, which path does she take? So, let's explore. Stating the what if, when Hermione Granger never existed. In this timeline, the hand never reaches for Granger at all. There is no Granger. There is no suburban childhood, no Muggle library, no puzzled dentist parents trying to understand letters from a school they can't see. Here, our what if is simple to state and brutal in its implications. What if Hermione Jean Granger was never born, because the brightest witch of her age arrived in the world as Hermione Lyra Black, pure-blood heiress of the House of Black? We fix our divergence in the same old house but in a different room. Wahlberger and Orion, older, more brittle, have one last child late in life, a miracle and a weapon. Or, in another version of this same dark thread, Regulus Black dies in that cave, but not before fathering a child whose existence is quietly legitimized after his heroic disappearance. Either way, the result is the same in this story. There is a black daughter where canon gave us a Muggle-born. This changes everything. Canon Hermione grows up in a world that doesn't believe in magic. Her parents are dentists. Her childhood is ordinary in the best possible way. She finds refuge in the local library, not a cursed tapestry room. She arrives at Hogwarts late to the party, desperate to prove she belongs, overcompensating with rules and revision because she knows the word mudblood will be thrown at her the first chance someone gets. Hermione Black grows up knowing she belongs. Tutors drill her in etiquette, Latin roots of spellwork, and the family tree before she's allowed to hold a wand. House elves appear when she snaps her fingers. The word mudblood is something she hears at breakfast, not as an insult to her, but as a lesson in who is less. She's not trying to get into the world of magic. She is the world of magic, or so she's told. So what if Bellatrix Lestrange is not just a name in a newspaper, but Aunt Bella, who smiles too widely and teaches little Hermione dueling stances between cups of tea? What if Draco isn't a sneering boy on a train, but the cousin she's been compared to at every family gathering? What if Sirius Black isn't a mysterious convict, but the cautionary tale hissed at her whenever she questions the word pure? What if, instead of the Muggle library, it's the Black family library that shapes her? Shelves of dark arts theory beside dusty volumes on goblin rebellions and bloodline magic. Does she still color-code her notes when half the footnotes are about curses? This isn't a story about Hermione magically resisting all of that, because she's just good. It's a story about how early indoctrination, family love twisted by ideology, and access to power press on the same stubborn, brilliant mind we know from canon. But because she's a Black, every choice she makes sends different shockwaves through the timeline. Harry and Ron will still meet Hermione. She will still be 11, still sharp, still insufferably well-read. But when she walks into that compartment, she brings a surname that makes Ron choke, and a family crest that makes Harry think of Sirius before he even understands why. Means he doesn't just meet a bossy girl with big teeth, he meets the future of a dying pure-blood dynasty. So, let's explore what it means when the girl who was supposed to be the outsider walks into Hogwarts as the most dangerous insider of them all. This isn't a redemption fantasy. Framing the tone and limits, this isn't a story about Hermione sweeping into Grimmauld Place, snapping her fingers, and turning the Black family into a progressive book club. It also isn't a story where she wakes up one morning and decides to be Bellatrix with better study habits. This changes everything, but it doesn't erase the world she's growing up in. We need to be clear about the frame before we touch the timeline. This isn't a story about easy redemption arcs or cartoon villainy. It's an exploration of what happens when you take the same mind we know from canon, the girl who color codes her notes for fun, and drop it into a house where portraits scream about blood purity and children are punished for asking them. Wrong questions. What does brightest witch of her age mean when every lesson is soaked in ideology? Because Hermione Black doesn't get to be a free agent. She grows up under the Black family crest, in rooms that still remember Wahlburger's rages, with house elves who flinch before they speak. There are tutors chosen for their politics, not just their skill. There are dinner conversations where appropriate opinions are rehearsed. And silence is its own kind of survival. Hanging over all of it is the cautionary tale of Sirius, the boy who said no and lost his home, his inheritance, his name. That threat is constant. Step out of line too far and you're not just grounded. You're disowned, erased from the tapestry, cut off from the only network that can protect you in a war. Marriage isn't romance, it's a contract. From childhood, Hermione hears her value discussed in terms of alliances. Malfoy, Lestrange, other sacred 28 families. Every compliment has a hook in it. Every advantage comes with a leash. Emotionally, that has a cost. Hermione knows she is safer than the Muggle-borns her relatives sneer at. She knows her wand, her vault, her surname opened doors that would be slammed in their faces. That knowledge curdles into guilt the first time she sees a Muggle-born classmate flinch at a slur she's been trained to say casually. She is too clever to fully believe the propaganda, but too entangled in Black expectations to simply burn it all down. And then there's Bellatrix. Imagine growing up with that as the family gold standard, devotion edged with mania, cruelty framed as strength. Hermione's worst fear isn't detention or disgrace. It's looking in the mirror one day and seeing that same wild, righteous certainty staring back. Means she second-guesses every moment she enjoys power, every time she wins an argument by making someone else small. At her core, though, she's still Hermione. She still loves books, rules, systems that make sense. She still believes in justice. But because she's a Black, those instincts get bent. Rules become tools to weaponize against enemies. Justice becomes something you argue for in drawing rooms, not something you march for in the street. When she organizes, it might be SPEW, rewritten as a humane stewardship proposal that keeps elves under Black control. So, let's explore a grounded, consequence-heavy timeline. Every privilege she has as Hermione Black, access to old magic, political capital, pure-blood safety, comes with a price she has to pay in shame, compromise, or danger. The question isn't, does she win? It's, what does she have to lose, and who does she become to change anything at all? Rebuilding Hermione, from anxious outsider to aristocratic prodigy. To see the cost, we have to rebuild the girl at the center of it. Who is Hermione if she grows up not on a carpeted staircase in a Muggle house, but under the watchful eyes of a tapestry that can erase her? Canon Hermione arrives at Hogwarts with frizzy hair, big teeth and a bigger chip on her shoulder. Every raised hand, every perfect score is a shield. She is a Muggle-born in a hostile timeline, desperate to prove she belongs because every sideways glance says she doesn't. She over-prepares, over-corrects, over-identifies with rules because rules are the only thing that seem fair. If she's the best, they can't throw her out. That's the bargain she thinks she has. Hermione Black walks in, already certain she belongs, not just at Hogwarts, but at the top of it. Growing up at Grimmauld Place, she's been told since she could read that the House of Black is one of the sacred 28, that their family doesn't just participate in wizarding history, it authors it. This changes everything about her posture. Her back is straight not from anxiety, but from etiquette drills. Her diction is crisp because pure-blood tutors corrected every dropped consonant long before McGonagall ever did. Instead of devouring textbooks alone, she's had early tutors in charms, history, and even carefully sanitized dark arts theory, not curses on house elves at the dinner table. but abstract discussions of power, will, and necessary force. Means she isn't shocked that such magic exists. She's shocked that other children haven't been warned. It's their responsibility to control it. She's less eager to please and more used to being obeyed. When she tells Ron to stop smearing jam on his essay, there's a tone that sounds uncomfortably close to Narcissa telling an elf to move faster. So what drives a girl who never doubts she belongs? Not fear of exclusion, but fear of disgrace. Canon Hermione worries about being expelled. Hermione Black worries about being burned off the family tree. In her bedtime stories, the monster under the bed has a name. Sirius, the boy who betrayed everything, the cautionary tale. Her nightmares aren't about trolls in bathrooms. They're about her face turning to smoke on ancient fabric while her mother looks away. That pressure reshapes her bravery and loyalty. In canon, she's loyal to friends and ideals, willing to stand with Harry against the Ministry because the rules have failed justice. Here, she begins loyal to the Black name. She throws herself between Draco and danger, not because he's kind, but because he's family. She studies harder than anyone not to prove Muggle-borns can excel, but to ensure no one can ever say a Black disappointed their blood. But because she is still Hermione, that loyalty is not fixed. As she meets Harry, Ron, and the reality of Voldemort's war, those same habits, relentless study, ruthless logic, inconvenient empathy, start to interrogate the stories she was raised on. This isn't a story about evil purebloods versus noble underdogs. It's a story about what happens when love and pressure from the wrong people twist even the best minds. The thesis of this timeline is simple and frightening. You can aim a child like a wand. Yet Hermione's gift is that she keeps asking why. So let's explore how that question turns an aristocratic prodigy into something far more dangerous to the old order than a simple rebel. Roadmap through a darker timeline from nursery to Battle of Hogwarts. So if you can aim a child like a wand, where does Hermione Black's trajectory actually begin? Not in a Muggle dentist's kitchen with overdue library books, but in the echoing nursery of Grimmauld Place, under a tapestry that tells her who matters and who doesn't before she can read her own name. Our roadmap through this darker timeline starts there, a small girl tracing the burn marks where blood traitors once were, asking too many questions. From those early years, we'll watch how tutors, house elves, and whispered arguments outside her door teach her what power is for. Is it to protect family or to control it? This isn't a story about a simple personality swap. It's a story about growing up in a house that rewards cruelty and curiosity in the same breath. Then we move to Hogwarts. Sorting is no longer an anxious plea to escape bullies. It's a calculated negotiation. What if the Hat finds a mind that has been trained for a Slytherin, but secretly yearns for a different kind of greatness? We'll sit in that pause as Hermione Black weighs Slytherin's influence against Ravenclaw's freedom, knowing her choice will echo through every corridor and common room alliance. This changes everything about how she meets Harry, Ron, and Draco on that first night. The familiar first-year troll becomes our first crisis test. Does a pureblood Black risk her reputation to save a half-blood and a blood traitor? Or does she orchestrate the rescue so she emerges as the heroine in front of the entire school? Each canonical beat, the troll, the time turner, even SPEW, will be revisited through this lens of strategy and status. When she forms SPEW, is it an act of rebellious empathy or the first draft of a political platform built on humane control of magical labor? Across the years, relationships twist. Draco isn't a sneering classmate. He's the cousin who shared her childhood tutors, the rival who knows every one of her weak spots. Sirius isn't just the falsely accused fugitive, he's the disgraced role model who proves there is another way to be a Black, and also the cautionary tale of what it costs. Harry isn't the outsider she educates about their world. He's an equal, another chosen symbol, someone who has also been aimed. But because he grew up on the margins, and she grew up at the center, their shared missions will clash as often as they align. We'll track the Department of Mysteries as a family civil war, Horcrux hunting as an aristocratic power grab in moral disguise, and the Battle of Hogwarts as the night every oath she's ever sworn comes due. Along the way, pure-blood politics tighten around her. Betrothal negotiations, Wizengamot grooming, whispered suggestions that a Black witch with her brilliance should be steering the post-war order, not merely surviving it, means she stands by the end on a knife edge. Hermione Black could become the architect of a reformed, more just wizarding world, or its most terrifyingly efficient ruler. So, let's explore, step by step, which crisis nudges her where, and which choice finally decides which version of Hermione walks out of Hogwarts alive. The House of Black as a cage, new conflicts and higher stakes. And that knife edge, it doesn't hover in the abstract. It cuts into her life in the most suffocating domestic ways. Because Hermione Black doesn't grow up in a cupboard. She grows up in a museum. Grimmauld Place isn't a home. It's a monument to everything she's supposed to become. Tapestries whisper her pedigree. Portraits correct her posture. Every polished silver serpent on the banister reminds her, "You are an investment, not a child." Poverty is gone, but in its place is something colder. Wealth that owns her back. Canon Hermione's conflict with the world starts with not belonging. Muggle parents, second-hand robes, professors doubting that a Muggle-born can be the brightest witch of her age. Here, the conflict flips. This Hermione belongs too much. She's told the Black fortune, the Black name, the Black library are hers to steward. That means lessons in estate law before she's 10, lectures on which families are acceptable to dine with, and the quiet horror of realizing that every galleon in her vault was once used to fund the politics she will grow up hating. This isn't a story about oppression turning her into a rebel from the outside. It's about indoctrination pressing in from the inside. She's taught that Muggle-borns dilute magic, that Weasleys are traitors who waste their blood on the wrong causes, that Dumbledore is a dangerous old man who wants to tear down proper wizarding society. And the worst part? At first, some of it makes sense to her. Of course, the Blacks are superior. They can trace their family back centuries. Of course, the Daily Prophet is biased in favor of her. Imagine 11-year-old Hermione on the Hogwarts Express, nose in a book on ancient wards, quietly assessing other students. Not who might be my friend, but who is strategically useful. Then she meets a red-haired boy in frayed robes and a bespectacled celebrity who clearly didn't grow up with pure-blood etiquette. Her training says, keep your distance. Her curiosity says, ask questions. That tiny hesitation is the crack in the wall. Around her, the world responds to Hermione Black as both prize and weapon. The Daily Prophet runs fawning profiles. The future of the noble and most ancient house. Death Eaters send elegantly worded invitations to discuss her promising future. Even Dumbledore, in this timeline, doesn't just see a clever girl. He sees a possible key to black vaults, to old alliances, to secrets hidden in that cursed library. Everyone wants something. Everyone is willing to be patient. And that library is its own moral battlefield. Those shelves hold spells that could protect Muggle-born students from attacks, rituals that might expose Horcruxes, genealogies that could topple pure-blood lies. But because every use of that knowledge risks strengthening the House of Black's influence, every life she saves might be another argument that the old families are indispensable. Does she raid the vault to fund safe houses for half-bloods, knowing the goblins will report every withdrawal to her conservative relatives? Does she leak black correspondence to Dumbledore, knowing it could send cousins to Azkaban and make her the perfect martyr for the next generation of purists? Means she can't take a stand without risking more than detention. One wrong speech at a slug club gathering could mean disownment. One secret meeting with Dumbledore could mean imprisonment under some family illness cover story. One open act of defiance, publicly befriending Harry Potter, defending a Muggle-born in the corridor, refusing a proposed marriage alliance. And she's not just endangering herself, she's exposing every vulnerable Black House elf, every squib cousin, every crack in the dynasty that others will rush to seal with blood. So, let's explore what happens the first time she has to choose. Protect a friend, or protect the house that owns her name. Because the moment she picks, the war stops being theoretical, and someone in her family starts planning how to break her. Themes of blood, choice, and justice. The first time she chooses the friend over the family, something fundamental snaps. Not loudly. Not with a duel in the drawing room. With a quiet, terrifying sentence. My name is Hermione Black and I refuse. Blood versus belief spoken out loud, because that's the core tension of this timeline. What if the brightest witch of her age grew up in the darkest pureblood family in Britain, and then decided they were wrong? Is she the sum of her surname, the polished heir of the sacred 28, or the girl who reads Muggle history in secret and realizes the word mudblood is just a weapon invented by cowards? This isn't a story about a quirky aesthetic swap. This is a story about whether belief can win a knife fight with blood. Canon gives us one chosen one by prophecy. This changes everything by giving us another, chosen by genealogy. Harry is marked by a curse. Hermione is marked by a tapestry. Means he spends growing up being hunted by a dark lord, while she spends growing up being groomed as the sensible Black, the one who will restore the family's honor without ending up in Azkaban. The question becomes, what do you do when you're the chosen heir of a legacy you've learned to despise? Watch how she reframes it. At Hogwarts, the hat whispers Slytherin, Ravenclaw, tradition. Advantage. She thinks of Bellatrix's laugh, of Sirius's absence, of a house elf flinching when her uncle raises his voice. She chooses the place where bravery is supposed to mean more than ancestry. Then she spends the next 7 years trying to turn Black from a threat into a shield. Family loyalty versus individual conscience runs through every choice. The Black motto, toujours pure, is in the crest over the grim old place fireplace. It's on the ring she wears to ministry functions. It's the first French phrase she ever translates correctly. Always pure. Always. But because she is Hermione, she starts testing the word. Pure of compared to what? Pure of mercy. When she helps a terrified Muggle-born first year navigate the slurs in the corridor, she realizes purity is a lie that survives on silence. And she is very bad at staying silent. Here's the pattern interrupt. She doesn't reject her inheritance. She weaponizes it. Instead of running from House Black, she uses its vaults to fund quiet legal aid for Muggle-born families. She hosts study circles at Grimmauld Place that look like revision groups and function as political cells. She learns ministry procedure not for personal glory, but to bury anti-Muggle-born legislation in committees until it dies of boredom. Collective heroism becomes her answer to solitary prophecy. While Harry is still framed as the boy destiny circles, Hermione builds networks, house elves, disillusioned pureblood cousins, Muggle-borns who know how to organize. Even a very confused Draco who realizes his cousin is either saving the world or planning a coup. Or both. So, let's explore that edge. Because this AU is asking a brutal question. Can someone raised in a system built on cruelty not only escape it, but dismantle it from the inside? And if she can, what does that cost her soul? Every compromise she makes to keep her cover, every half-truth she tells to protect a friend and placate a parent, pushes her closer to the line where justice and vengeance start to rhyme. By the time the war comes to Hogwarts, Hermione Black isn't just choosing between family and friends. She's choosing what the name Black will mean for the next 100 years, and whether she can live with the blood on her hands if she wins. Cut to 1980s Grimmauld, a childhood of portraits, curses, and secret questions. By the time the war comes, Hermione Black is making choices with centuries behind them. But every war has a prologue. Cut. London 1986. 12 Grimmauld Place. Age 6. Hermione sits on a too-high chair in the drawing room, feet not quite touching the threadbare rug. Quill cramped in a small hand. The air smells of dust, old magic, and something singed. Across from her, a tutor in severe grey robes taps a long finger against a parchment of names. Again, he says, "The sacred 28, in order." She recites, steady and precise, Black, Malfoy, Lestrange. Names that are supposed to feel like a lullaby. Names that in this house are a religion. When she stumbles over Pruitt, his eyes narrow and he makes her write it 28 times in Latin just to prove she can. This isn't a story about a girl who discovers magic by accident. Hermione grows up with it pressed into her bones, conjugated into her verbs, drilled into her posture. In the afternoons, it's Latin incantations until her tongue aches. In the evenings, etiquette, how to incline her head to an elder Malfoy, how to never turn her back on a Lestrange. There are rules for how a black heir stands, walks, breathes. There are fewer rules about when she is allowed to speak, but she learns those faster, because when she asks too much, her mother's gaze turns to ice. Whether you cast Wahlberger herself in that role, or a cousin cut from the same tapestry, the effect is the same. A cold, exacting matriarch who moves through Grimmauld Place as if it's a battlefield she already won. Her voice is always either too soft or too sharp. Hermione, shoulders. Hermione, wand grip. Hermione, you are not a Weasley girl to run about. Relatives drift through. Pale, perfumed Narcissa, a laughing, sharper Bellatrix before Azkaban takes its due. Stiff-backed great-aunts who pinch Hermione's chin and murmur, "A proper Black at last." They drink dark tea and darker gossip, and sometimes a name slips out on a hiss. Sirius, the blood traitor, the shame. On the wall, the family tree watches everything. One rainy day, Hermione trails ink-stained fingers along the embroidered branches, mouthing names under her breath. There are gaps, scorched holes where someone once was. She frowns. "Mother, why is this one burned?" A small, innocent hand hovers near a blackened space. The room goes still. Her mother's wand is in her hand before Hermione finishes the question. Not raised, not yet, just there. "You will not touch that tapestry," she says, each word clipped. "And you will never ask about those who betrayed their blood. Do you understand?" Hermione does. And she doesn't. How can blood be betrayed? Does it get up and walk away? That night, she finds the library. Grimmauld library is a forest of spines, most of them heavy with dust and prejudice. But because house elves are creatures of habit, they shelve even the contraband where it belongs. Behind a row of treatises on goblin subjugation, Hermione's searching fingers hit something thin, bright, and wrong. A Muggle Studies primer. With pictures, she opens it on the floor, candle guttering beside her, and the world tilts. Electricity, aeroplanes, a photograph of a smiling child with brown curls who could almost be her. What if there is more than this house, these rules, this tapestry with its burned-out names? What if Muggle is not a curse but a question? She doesn't know the word canon. She doesn't know that in another timeline she'd be that Muggle child, growing up with dentists for parents and library cards instead of bloodline charts. She only knows that there are things her family hates, and therefore there are things worth learning. So she makes a decision right there on the library rug. She will master every charm they put in front of her. She will memorize every black ancestor, every pureblood rule, but she will also read every forbidden book she can reach. About magic, about muggles, about the truth pressed into the silences. This changes everything. Because obedience will keep her safe, inquiry will make her dangerous. And little Hermione Black, alone in the flickering half-light, is already wondering which one she wants more. So, let's explore what happens when that curiosity walks into Hogwarts. Sirius the Ghost Story, a different kind of role model. Curiosity walks into Hogwarts later. Before that, it has to survive Grimmauld Place. Because in this house, the first ghost story Hermione Black ever hears isn't about a spectre in chains. It's about a boy who walked out the front door and never came back. A boy whose absence is burned into the wall. Sirius is not spoken of as a person. He is an incantation. Do you want to end up like Sirius? Hisses her mother when Hermione hesitates over a slur. He chose blood traitors and half-breeds over his family. Wahlberger snaps as if the words themselves are contagious. The adults use his name the way other parents use Boggart's, to scare children into obedience. This isn't a story about bedtime tales and warm cocoa. This is a story about weaponized genealogy. Hermione learns early that some names are louder in their absence. On the Black family tapestry, there is a scorched, ragged hole where Sirius Orion Black once lived in golden thread. She is supposed to avert her eyes. She does not. She stands on the landing, counting the singed edges, imagining what he must have done to deserve being burned out of his own blood. What if it was more than rudeness and bad grades? What if it was refusing to curse a Muggle-born? What if it was saying no? The adults insist it was betrayal, treason. He threw away everything, Bellatrix purrs one evening, almost delighted by the drama of it, chose a filthy half-blood and a mudblood girl over his house. Hermione files that away. Half-blood, mudblood Potters. The names rattle around in her head, refusing to settle. One night, she is meant to be in bed. Instead, she sits on the stairs, small fingers curled around the banister, listening. Voices drift from the drawing room, low, tense, edged with something that might be fear. Azkaban is too good for him, someone says. Blowing up that street, killing all those muggles. And after what happened to the Potters, they trusted him, another voice cuts in, softer, sadder, made him secret keeper. He handed them to the Dark Lord himself. Hermione doesn't understand Fidelius, or secret keepers, or why the name Potter makes the room go quiet. She only understands the shape of the story. A Black who chose the wrong side, a Dark Lord who fell, a prison that eats your soul. The canon version of events reaches her as a distorted echo, filtered through pureblood fear and fury. But because children are excellent pattern finders, she starts sketching connections in her mind. If Sirius chose wrong, does that mean there was a right choice to be made? Sirius becomes a paradox for her. Proof that a Black can walk away from the script, and proof that the script will then try to destroy you, means he is both cautionary tale and secret role model. When Wahlberger rants about that ungrateful whelp, Hermione hears, under the venom, that he once said no and kept saying it until the house spat him out. Growing up with that story means her internal conflict sharpens. Obedience will protect her. Rebellion might save someone else. Which matters more? One rainy afternoon when the house is dozing and the portraits are bored, Hermione steals a scrap of parchment and a bit of gold ink. She copies the branching lines of the family tree from memory. At the edge, where the scorch mark should be, her hand hesitates. Then, carefully, she writes it in Sirius Black. The letters gleam for a moment before the ink dries. She stares at the name she has resurrected, pulse loud in her ears. It is a tiny act of treason, flimsy and flammable, but it is hers. What if one day she has to choose a side the way he did? What if the next name to be burned away is her own? When Hogwarts letters arrive, that question will follow her onto the train. Bellatrix, Narcissa, and the aunts of ideology. On the train, that question has a face. Two, actually. Bellatrix first. She arrives at platform 9 3/4, like a storm in human form. Dark eyes alight, laughter just a little too sharp. This is the terrifying embodiment of pure blood fanaticism the canon warned us about. But here, she's not a distant name in a file. She's Aunt Bella, who bends down, grips Hermione's chin, and studies her as if she's assessing a weapon. What if the brightest witch of her age grew up with that gaze as her measure of worth? Bellatrix is intense, charismatic, disturbingly proud of the Dark Lord. She speaks of him the way other aunts speak of family holidays. She tells Hermione stories of glory and cleansing, of how the Blacks were always meant to stand at the Dark Lord's right hand. This isn't a story about a girl accidentally stumbling into darkness. This is a child being told that cruelty is tradition, that brilliance means devotion to a cause that demands blood. Then there's Narcissa, elegant, controlled, her wand hand steady and her smile even steadier. Where Bellatrix is fire, Narcissa is polished ice. She glides through King's Cross, correcting Hermione's posture with a light touch, murmuring which families to acknowledge and which to ignore. She doesn't rave about the Dark Lord. She talks about alliances, appearances, the Ministry, the Malfoys. She teaches Hermione the art of saying the right thing while thinking something else entirely. Survival as etiquette. Pattern interrupt. In this timeline, Hermione's first lesson in subtext isn't from Professor McGonagall. It's from Narcissa Malfoy over tea in the Grimmauld Place drawing room, explaining why one never openly insults a man one might need to bribe later. And somewhere in the background of all this instruction is a silence, an empty place on the tapestry, and an empty place at the table. Andromeda, the disowned aunt. Another burned name Hermione isn't supposed to ask about. When she does, the room goes cold. Bellatrix's mouth thins. Narcissa's voice turns to glass. She made her choice, is all they say. But because Hermione has already inked Sirius back into existence, that absence itches. What if defecting is also a kind of power? We get a formative scene to crystallize these paths. Bellatrix has taken Hermione aside at Grimmauld for proper instruction. The spell on the page is borderline dark, something that twists pain rather than inflicts it outright. Hermione masters the wand movement in 2 tries. Bellatrix throws her head back and laughs, delighted. "Oh, you are a true Black," she purrs. "You'll make them kneel." Later, in the corridor's dim light, Narcissa intercepts her. No shouting, no hexes, just a perfectly composed woman adjusting Hermione's sleeve. "Power," Narcissa says softly, isn't in how much you can destroy, it's in what you can survive. Remember that, little cousin, means he isn't the only one in this war who learns that lesson the hard way. So let's explore what that does to an 11-year-old walking into Hogwarts. By the time the sorting hat touches her head, Hermione has 3 mirrors held up to her: Bellatrix's fanaticism, Narcissa's strategy, Andromeda's exile. She doesn't yet know which reflection will win. But the choice is no longer abstract ideology. This changes everything about how she hears words like courage, ambition, and loyalty. And the next time she walks past the Black family tapestry, she doesn't just wonder who will be burned away, she wonders who will step off it first. Analytical pause. How early indoctrination warps canon Hermione's traits. She wonders who will step off it first, and then realizes the tapestry has already stepped off into her. Because this is where we pause the narrative and look straight at what's happening under Hermione Black's skin. In canon, Hermione's famous for loving rules. Prefects' badges, class schedules, the library's closing time. She clings to structure because structure means safety for a Muggle-born in a hostile world. Here, growing up in Grimmauld Place, that same instinct latches onto something far older and colder: tradition. The House of Black has rules for posture, for speech, for who deserves to live on that wall. So her love of rules becomes a love of order, of knowing exactly where everyone belongs. At first, that maps neatly onto pure-blood ideology. Of course, blood matters. Of course, Muggle-borns are dangerous chaos. The system tells her so, and systems have always been her comfort. This isn't a story about Hermione suddenly turning into Bellatrix overnight. It's about how the traits we recognize, the color-coded revision charts, the exam anxiety, the relentless self-discipline, get weaponized in a different direction. That terrifying work ethic? In this timeline, it means she's the perfect Black heir. She masters etiquette with the same intensity she once used on arithmancy, memorizing which fork, which honorific, which insult is acceptable at which table. She drills dueling forms until her wand arm aches, because Aunt Bellatrix praises precision. She devours theory, from warding to bloodline magic, because Narcissa rewards her with quiet, rare approval. Every "well done, Hermione" fuses her identity tighter to the family cause. But because she's still Hermione, that cause keeps running into a problem. Her moral compass refuses to lie flat. Canon Hermione's sense of right is grounded in fairness. House elf rights, werewolf stigma, the whole SPEW. Arc. Here, she's taught that right means protecting the family, preserving purity, despising Muggle-borns she's never met. When she hears that a squib cousin was quietly erased from the tapestry, she's told it was merciful. When she asks why Andromeda's baby is a disgrace, the answers don't quite scan. The adults call it loyalty. Her gut calls it something else. That's cognitive dissonance, and she catalogues it the way she catalogues spells. Carefully, secretly, for later. Compare that to canon. There, her outsider status is the engine of her empathy. Being the Muggle-born in the room means she spots every wince, every slur, every closed door, and she builds coalitions with house elves and half-breeds because she recognizes the pattern. In this story, she's an insider. The doors open before she even reaches them. That delays her empathy for other marginalized groups, but it doesn't erase it. It compresses it. So when it finally detonates, it's more radical because she knows exactly which gears to break from the inside. Which brings us to Hogwarts. What happens when the girl trained to fear Muggle-borns is suddenly sharing a classroom with them? When she meets Harry Weasley, poor and famous, and Ron, a proud blood traitor, and they don't match the cautionary tales, Does she double down, using rules and tradition as armor? Or does she begin, very quietly, to defect from within? So, let's explore what sorting a Black into Hogwarts really means. The Hogwarts letter: pride, fear, and a name that opens doors. The owl is not a miracle. It is punctual. It taps once against the high, grimy window of Grimmauld Place, and everyone in the dining room goes still, not in wonder, but in confirmation. Of course it has come. Of course it is addressed to Hermione Black. This isn't a story about a little girl discovering magic. Hermione has grown up with portraits that shout, house elves that flinch, and cousins who duel for fun in the drawing room. The question was never if she'd go to Hogwarts. The question, repeated at every tedious family dinner, was where the hat would dare to put her. About time, her father says, in that dry, aristocratic way that makes praise sound like a verdict. Her mother takes the envelope, checks the emerald ink, the crest, the seal, more concerned with propriety than content, and passes it down the table. "You'll do us proud in Slytherin," she says, already turning back to her tea. "Your grandfather held the house record for points in his year. You'll aim higher. There's no talk of wands behaving strangely or platforms that sound impossible. Instead, there's a rapid-fire list of expectations. Which professors must be impressed? Which family's children she must befriend? Which names? Weasley, Tonks. She must avoid unless strategy demands otherwise. Bellatrix, visiting for the day, laughs sharply and says, "If the hat even whispers Gryffindor, you take it off and demand a recount." No one treats that as a joke. Hermione feels the familiar burn of pride in her chest. This is what she has been trained for. The pure-blood curriculum drilled by tutors, the Latin roots of spells, the family tree memorized back to the Middle Ages. She knows more theory than most first years in canon ever dream of. She also knows exactly how often the word mudblood has been used in conversation around her, tossed out with casual contempt. What if the children it's aimed at aren't monsters, but children? She doesn't ask. Not out loud. Because questions about blood get you cold looks and colder lectures. Later, when the dining room is empty and the portraits are dozing, Hermione takes the letter upstairs. She sits on the edge of her bed, in a room lined with heavy books and heavier expectations, and finally lets herself just look at it. Her fingers trace the Hogwarts crest, the lion, the snake, the badger, the eagle, all tangled together around that motto, "Never tickle the sleeping dragon." It's ridiculous and solemn at once. She wonders, not for the first time, whether the castle will feel like an extension of Grimmauld Place, or a contradiction. Will the houses confirm everything she's been taught about blood and worth? Or will she look across a table at a Muggle-born and realize the adults have been lying, because this letter isn't just an invitation, it's a test of her tutors, of her family, of her. Hermione folds the parchment back into its envelope with surgical precision. She imagines the train, the scarlet engine steaming, compartments full of strangers. Somewhere on that train will be Harry Potter, raised as a Weasley, and Ron, a boy she has been warned about in careful, poisonous terms. Her parents have prepared her for house politics, for professors, for maintaining the Black legacy. They have not prepared her for sitting across from a poor, famous boy who laughs too loudly, or a freckled blood traitor who treats his family name as a promise, not a weapon. This changes everything, because once Hermione Black steps onto the Hogwarts Express and that compartment door slides open, the carefully controlled Black timeline collides with a very different story. And the girl who was never allowed to ask the wrong questions is about to meet two boys who will not stop giving her new ones. Platform 9 3/4, First contact with the wrong sort. Platform 9 3/4 is the first real battlefield. Not of spells and curses, but of glances and whispers. Of who steps aside and who is expected to. Hermione Black arrives at King's Cross in a small procession that makes the air bend around it. A house elf scurries ahead with a polished trolley. Her mother's robes are a severe, perfect black. Her father's cane taps a slow, claiming rhythm on the tiles. Wands are not drawn, but power is. Other pureblood families on the Muggle side glance over, register the crest on the trunk, and straighten almost involuntarily. This isn't a story about a lonely girl with two big front teeth dragging her own trunk. It's about a child who has never been anywhere in public without the weight of House Black settling over her shoulders like an invisible cloak. They pass through the barrier in a practiced, unhurried sweep. On the magical side, the atmosphere changes. Robes, owls, steam, and then that subtle shift Hermione has been taught to notice, back straightening, conversations dipping, eyes flicking to the serpent and stars on her father's signet ring. Deference, edged with fear. It feels normal. It also feels thin. Pattern interrupt, because right in the middle of all that carefully curated awe, she hears it. Ron, you've got something on your nose. The voice is warm, flustered, and utterly unconcerned with ancient houses. Hermione's head turns before she can stop herself. There, by a battered trolley, is the wrong image for this polished, pureblood tableau. Too many children in hand-me-down robes, trunks with scuffs, an owl cage that has clearly seen better days. The twins are nudging each other. Ron is going pink and swatting at his face, and the only thing about them that looks expensive is the way the woman at the center pours affection over all of them, without counting the cost. Her aunt's voice cuts across Hermione's curiosity, low and disdainful. Weasleys, blood traitors. Look at the state of them. Hermione does. She sees a patch on a sleeve, a taped wand case, a trunk latch fixed with a charm that flickers. But she also sees the way the mother's hand automatically finds Ron's shoulder, the way the older boys orbit back to check on the younger ones. Chaos, yes, but because it is chaos held together by an easy, unconscious love, it feels strangely solid. Then the boy appears, small, skinny clothes hanging wrong, hair a mess that would have earned Hermione a lecture. He stands a little apart, scanning the platform with that particular stiffness of someone who has learned not to take up space, and yet the moment a witch near him catches sight of his forehead, the air shifts again. Is that the scar? Harry Potter. Hermione's father goes very still. Calculation, not awe, settles into his features. A living symbol, a political variable, a potential weapon or threat. Means he is catalogued, not greeted. Hermione, though, notices something else. He looks lost. He edges toward the barrier, clearly unsure how to get through, and for one suspended second, she expects one of the watching adults to intervene. A Black, perhaps, or any of the people whispering his name. Instead, the red-haired woman breaks off from her own whirlwind of children. First time at Hogwarts, she asks him, voice kind, brisk, utterly unawed. He nods. I don't know how to. Of course you don't, she says in the tone of someone who has said of course you don't to many frightened children. All right, dear. Watch carefully. Between platforms 9 and 10, best do it at a bit of a run. Hermione feels something unfamiliar twist under her ribs. Envy, sharp and sudden. No one has ever said of course you don't to her without making it an accusation. Come along, Hermione, her mother murmurs, fingers closing, gentle but unyielding around her wrist. Don't stare at them. Or at him. As she steered toward the train, Hermione glances back over her shoulder. She sees Harry vanish through the barrier after the Weasley woman, small and determined. She sees the cluster of red heads laughing, arguing, tugging trunks. Later, in a compartment full of proper pure-blood heirs, the conversation is all surnames and alliances. Hermione sits straight, says the right things, and lets the script of this timeline run through her head. But her eyes keep drifting to the window, to where she last saw the wrong sort. Why do they seem more alive than anyone who has ever taught her what it means to be a Black? So, let's explore how long Hermione can ignore that question once the train starts moving. The train ride. Draco as cousin, Harry as puzzle. The train shudders. The whistle screams, and Hermione Black makes a decision that looks obedient on the surface. She stays where her mother put her, in a compartment full of green-trimmed confidence and old money nerves, with Draco Malfoy sprawled opposite like he owns the carriage. Draco is in his element. This is his stage. He's already unwrapped a box of chocolates from Narcissa, offering them around with the air of a prince dispensing favors. Two other pure-blood boys, Nott and Zabini, nod along as he lists the families on the train, ticking them off in that Malfoy drawl. The Longbottoms, the Weasleys, the rumors about Harry Potter. It's Canon Draco, but with an audience that has known him since he was in dragon print pajamas. Hermione sits straight, hands folded on her new wand, and watches. Cousin, not stranger. Rival, not idol. Growing up at Grimmauld means she's seen Draco throw tantrums, lose chess matches, get jam on his robes. So when he starts boasting about the Malfoy estate, about father's seat on the Board of Governors, she hears the performance under the pride. This isn't a story about a girl brainwashed beyond recognition. She knows the script. She can recite the sacred 28 in alphabetical order. But because she's Hermione, she's also cataloguing tone, timing, and who flinches when. He sneers when the Weasleys go past the door, red hair a blur through the glass. Blood traitors, and they took Potter in for the summer, did you hear? Pathetic, clinging to fame when they can't even afford proper robes. The compartment snickers. Hermione's mouth curves, but her mind catches on the word took. Not used, not exploited, took him in. As family. What does that mean for a boy who lost everything as a baby? The pattern interrupts when the trolley comes, and Draco gets bored. He tugs Hermione into the corridor under the pretense of stretching his legs, really hunting for a legend. He wants to be the first Malfoy to shake Harry Potter's hand in this new timeline. They find him exactly where canon says they will. In a cramped compartment with Ron Weasley, half a chocolate frog between them. Harry's hair is a mess, his glasses slightly crooked, his expression wary but open. Means he's been warned about attention, but not taught to despise it. Draco does the speech. The name, the hand, the warning about the wrong sort. Only this time, Hermione is there, just behind his shoulder, black crest on her cloak, weighing every word. She watches Harry look from Draco's offered hand to Ron's stiff shoulders. She notes how Harry's "I think I can tell who the wrong sort are for myself, thanks," isn't sharp so much as steady. Polite even. She notices Ron's ears go red, his jaw clench, the way he shifts closer to Harry without seeming to mean to. Protection as reflex. And she sees Draco's arrogance land not as impressive, but as embarrassing. Transparent. A 12-year-old parroting his father. What if the wrong sort aren't the ones she was told? Hermione doesn't intervene. Not yet. She lets Draco huff, toss an insult at Ron's hand-me-downs, stalk away with a dramatic swirl. She follows, because that's what a black heiress does, but she files the entire encounter away with ruthless precision. Harry Potter, polite under pressure. Ron Weasley, defensive but loyal. Draco, powerful name, weak pitch. This changes everything, but only inside her, for now. On the surface, she returns to the Slytherin compartment, to laughter and lineage talk, to the safety of the story she's been told. Underneath, a different story is starting to write itself. So, let's explore how long Hermione Black can keep serving House Black's interests once she realizes Harry and Ron aren't the wrong sort at all. Sorting Night, Slytherin's Call, Ravenclaw's Temptation, Gryffindor's Risk. By the time the first years reach the Great Hall, Hermione Black is holding herself together by habit. Chin up, shoulders back, every step measured on the stone floor. But because her name is Black, the room reacts before she even reaches the stool. Whispers move faster than the candles. Is that a Black? Thought the line was dying out. Teachers exchange loaded glances over their goblets. McGonagall's mouth tightens. Snape's eyes sharpen, calculating. At the Slytherin table, heads turn in perfect predatory unison. To them, this isn't a nervous 11-year-old. This is an heirloom walking. Canon gave us a mousy, bushy-haired Muggle-born, hoping someone will want her. This Hermione knows she is wanted, expected. The green and silver table watches her, as if they're already clearing a space, already drafting the headlines. Black Heiress claims her house. Draco, somewhere in that cluster of pale faces, straightens with proprietary interest. Of course, his cousin will be Slytherin. Where else would she go? Her name is called Black Hermione. The Great Hall inhales. She walks forward with that careful, aristocratic grace she's been drilled in since she could walk, but her palms are slick against the wood of the stool. The hat drops over her eyes, and the hall vanishes. Well, a dry voice murmurs in her ear. This is interesting. Hermione's first impulse is to argue. You're a hat, she thinks crisply. You can't be interested. There's a tiny traitorous flare of satisfaction when it chuckles. Sharp, very sharp. Mind like a library on fire. Ambition, too. You want to prove yourself. You want to restore what your family has lost. Slytherin would make you powerful. The black tapestry at Grimmauld Place. Her name already embroidered beneath the silver and green crest. Her father's hand on her shoulder, heavy with pride. Bellatrix's wild smile promising that their house will rise again. Slytherin means safety, approval. It means she will not be the disappointment Sirius became. But you question things. The hat goes on. You read more than they told you to. You notice what isn't on the family tree. You wonder why some names were burned off. A different vision now. Quiet corners, ink-stained fingers, Ravenclaw Tower spiraling up into the stars. You love learning for its own sake. Ravenclaw would let you ask the questions you already know you're not supposed to ask. Hermione's throat tightens, because that part is true in a way she's never said aloud. There were books at Grimmauld she wasn't meant to open. She opened them. There were rules about who mattered. She tested the edges of those rules in her head, even when her mouth recited the right answers. And yet, the hat adds softly, there's something else. A streak that doesn't match the tapestry at all. It shows her a flash of the train, Harry's awkward smile, Ron's ears going red as he talks about his family, the way she'd felt an irrational, dangerous urge to defend them when the others mocked. A memory of standing up to her father once, just once, about an elf's treatment, and the cold silence that followed. Defiance, the hat names it. Courage, a willingness to stand in front of the blow instead of behind the shield. Gryffindor would fan that spark. Hermione's heart is pounding now. Gryffindor is the house of blood traitors, of Weasleys, of Sirius, the shameful name burned off the wall. Gryffindor means war in her family. It means being alone. You know what they want. The hat presses. They want Slytherin, the House of Blacks. They want you to be what your blood says you are. But what if you aren't? The voice gentles, but the question is a blade. Do you want what they want, or what you are? Because every choice here is a betrayal of something. Slytherin betrays that buried, reckless spark. Ravenclaw betrays the plan they've been grooming her for. Gryffindor betrays her family to its face. She sees the futures branching. In Slytherin, she is a princess of the New Order, standing beside Draco as the old ways harden. In Ravenclaw, she disappears into books and theories, changing the world from a safer distance. In Gryffindor, she walks to the red and gold table and feels the burn of every black eye on her back. Time to choose, the hat whispers. Blood, mind, or heart? Hermione draws a breath. Somewhere far away, the hall is waiting. The Slytherin table is already smiling. Harry and Ron at Gryffindor don't know they're holding their breath for her too. She makes a decision. The hat opens its mouth, and the word it's about to shout will rewrite this entire timeline. Hermione Black the Gryffindor. Gryffindor. The shout cracks through the hall, too loud, too wrong. For a second there's silence, the kind that falls after a dropped glass, before the room remembers how to breathe. The Slytherin table flinches as one smiles freezing, hands slipping back from the space they'd already made for her among green and silver. Up at the staff table, this isn't just a sorting. This is a political earthquake. McGonagall's teacup pauses halfway to her mouth. Snape's eyes narrow, calculating. Dumbledore's expression doesn't change much, but his fingers tighten on the arms of his chair. Because the name Black in red and gold, this changes everything. Hermione pulls the hat off and steps down, knees suddenly unsteady. Terror hits first, sharp and cold. She can already see her mother's face when the letter arrives, hear her father's voice saying the word Gryffindor like a diagnosis. Another Black gone wrong. Another shame on the family tree. But under that fear there's something else. A wild, breathless exhilaration. For the first time in her carefully managed, pure-blood childhood, she has chosen something for herself, and the world has had to rearrange around it. Her heart is pounding, her palms are sweating. She feels alive. She walks toward the Gryffindor table, and the hall watches the way she moves. Head high, shoulders back, pure blood poise worn like armor over a brand new scar of defiance. Whispers follow her. Did you hear? A Black. Thought she'd be Slytherin for sure. Another Black gone wrong. That's what my dad will say. At the Slytherin table, Draco Malfoy's offended glare could peel paint. This was supposed to be simple. Malfoy and Black, cousins and allies, ruling their house the way their parents ruled the old families. Now his cousin has walked away from him in front of the entire school. That public humiliation means he will not forgive her easily. Pattern interrupt, cut to the Gryffindor bench, where the reaction is not what she expects. The Gryffindors aren't cheering yet. They're staring. The name Black means something very different to them. Fred and George exchange a look that says trouble. Older students mutter Sirius under their breath, half in awe, half in warning. This isn't a story about easy acceptance. Harry and Ron make room automatically, still not quite understanding what they've just witnessed. They only know Sirius as the traitor who betrayed Harry's parents, the madman in Azkaban. But because they grew up Weasley adjacent in this timeline, the surname rings a faint, unpleasant bell from overheard adult conversations. A Black in Gryffindor That's wrong, fascinating, dangerous. Hermione sits with the easy grace of someone raised among ancestral portraits and house elves, and that confidence clashes with every idea Harry and Ron have about what a Gryffindor girl is supposed to be. She thanks them in a clear, polished voice, not shy at all, and then turns to study the table as if she's cataloguing a new library. Who are these people who cheered for blood traitors? Who chose heart over heritage? What if they're not fools, but brave in a way her family never taught her to be? Harry feels it before he understands it. This girl is trouble, the interesting kind. Ron, still smarting from being poor and ginger in a world obsessed with lineage, bristles at her pureblood composure, even as he's impressed by it. And that's the point. In this moment, Hermione Black commits her first major act of rebellion. She chooses courage over comfort, house over house, and plants herself on the wrong side of a century of Black tradition. It means open conflict with her parents. It means Draco as an enemy, not an ally. It means the ideology she was raised to protect now has a traitor on the inside. So, let's explore what happens when the brightest witch of her age grows up Black, and then chooses to be Gryffindor anyway. Year 1 rewritten. Trolls, trio formation, and a Black in the bathroom. Hermione Black walks into Hogwarts already carrying a war in her last name. In canon, she spends those first months desperate to prove she belongs. Here, everyone already knows she does. That changes the shape of her hunger. She isn't chasing professors' approval because she's starved of adult praise. She's grown up with tutors, with Blacks and Malfoys debating politics over dinner, with her marks treated as a family investment. So she isn't the girl frantically waving her hand to be seen. She's the girl who answers because of course she knows, and of course McGonagall knows her parents, and of course Slughorn has already sent a note about future Slug Club dinners. This isn't a story about an awkward outsider clawing her way in. It's about an insider trying to dominate a new arena before it can judge her first. Means she tracks the top of every grade column like a hawk. Means she curates who she sits with in the common room. The Black in Gryffindor becomes a whispered title, half scandal, half dare. Some students are fascinated. Some are terrified. More than a few are resentful. Because the resentment that clings to her isn't about being a Muggle-born know-it-all. It's about arrogance and ancestry. The Slytherins sneer at her Weasley tendencies for choosing red and gold. The Gryffindors flinch when she mentions Grimmauld Place, or when Draco calls her cousin across the Great Hall. Harry and Ron, who in this timeline have already seen what Malfoy's name means on the train, watch her with wary eyes. What if she's just another pureblood spy? Another kid who'll run to her family the second things get messy. So when the pre-troll conflict comes, it's sharpened by that tension. Ron doesn't mock her for being a nightmare Muggle-born. He snaps, in front of half the year, must be easy. Being a Black, professors fawning, Malfoy at your elbow, and you still act like we're beneath you. It hits harder than know-it-all, because it lands on the fault line she's been pretending isn't there. She flees to the bathroom, not just humiliated, but cracked open. Sitting in that cold stone echo chamber, she's replaying Bellatrix's lessons on family honor, Sirius's warnings about Black cruelty, the way Gryffindors lower their voices when they say her surname. If Slytherin thinks she's a traitor, and Gryffindor thinks she's a spy, who is she for? Then the troll comes. Canon gives us a frantic rush and a lucky knockout. Here, the emotional stakes are different. Harry and Ron hear troll in the dungeons and realize Hermione is missing. They hesitate. This is the girl who looked down her nose at their second-hand robes and flinched when Ron mentioned the Burrow's ghoul. But because she's also the girl who stood up to Draco in potions, who corrected Snape even when his eyes went cold, something in them refuses to leave her. So they go. Not for a black, for a classmate. The bathroom fight plays out with the same chaos. Flying debris, Ron's terrified spell, Harry clinging to the troll's back. That the aftermath is where this timeline tilts. Hermione, bruised and shaking, watches two nobodies from a disgraced blood traitor family and a half-forgotten war orphan lie to McGonagall to protect her. No black would risk censure for her like that, without calculating the advantage. No cousin would take the blame, so she keeps her spotless record. This changes everything, because in that corridor, she feels something she has never trusted. Loyalty with no strings attached. She covers for them in turn, claiming she went after the troll alone. It's clumsy, transparent, but it's a choice. The first time her instinct is to protect people who can't offer her status. Only friendship. The trio doesn't form here because they share a bathroom and a near-death experience. It forms because Hermione Black, raised on the gospel of blood, has just seen a different creed in action. Growing up, family meant obligation. In this moment, it starts to mean something else. People who run toward you when every lesson you've ever learned says they shouldn't. And once she's tasted that, how is she ever going back to being just the black in Gryffindor? So, let's explore how that new definition of family loyalty drives every choice she makes from here on, especially when the stone and the Dark Lord hunting it enter the picture. The Philosopher's Stone, a black hair against a black legacy. So when the whispers start about a mysterious third-floor corridor and a package from Gringotts, Hermione isn't starting from nothing. She's starting from the Black Library. Canon Hermione has to stumble on Nicholas Flamel by accident, buried in a chocolate frog card and a stack of borrowed books. Hermione Black has grown up hearing his name in drawling conversations over port, seeing it footnoted in leather-bound tomes that never make it into flourish and blots. What if, the moment Hagrid slips and says Flamel, something in her clicks because she's seen that name etched into a black family lineage of research into alchemy, longevity, and the proper wizarding way to defeat death. This changes everything about the trio's investigation. She doesn't just race to the library because she loves homework. She races there already half sure of what she'll find, already hearing Aunt Wahlberger's portrait sneer about fools who trust Dumbledore with such treasures. The stone isn't just a fascinating object now, it's a political fault line. Purebloods have chased immortality for generations. The idea that Albus the radical Dumbledore is guarding the ultimate prize. For a black heir, that's explosive. And remember, in this timeline, Dumbledore isn't her untouchable hero. At Grimmauld Place, his name is a curse and a warning. This isn't a story about a girl who blindly trusts the headmaster's wisdom. It's about a girl who's been told, very clearly, that Dumbledore breaks families, topples old houses, and smiles while he does it. So when she learns the stone is at Hogwarts, she doesn't just worry about Voldemort. She wonders which side Dumbledore is really playing, and what it means that he's effectively using a school full of children as a vault. That suspicion threads through every obstacle. Devil's Snare. Her pure-blood training means she's seen dangerous plants in the black greenhouse, heard the correct tone of voice adults use when something can kill you. The Flying Keys. She recognizes old warding patterns from black properties, understands that this is overkill for a school, and exactly right for a war. The chess game? In canon, Ron shines. Here, Hermione still lets him lead, but she's playing two games at once, the board in front of them, and the question of who designed a child-sized battlefield and called it education. She's also more cautious. Breaking rules isn't just detentions, it's reports that could reach her parents, or worse, her aunts. Being the black in Gryffindor means every misstep reflects on the family. So when she chooses to go through that trapdoor, it isn't impulsive rebellion. It's a calculated betrayal of everything she's being raised to protect. Then the Mirror of Error said, Canon Hermione might see herself with perfect grades, ministry awards, the Order of Merlin. Hermione Black stands before that glass and, for a terrifying moment, doesn't know which version of herself she wants more. The girl whose name has been scrubbed off the black tapestry entirely, or the witch standing in front of a restored, reformed House of Black. Her parents' hands on her shoulders, the family motto rewritten, is her deepest desire to be free of them or to save them. Whichever image the mirror shows, it hits her harder than the flames, the keys, or the chess pieces ever could. Because it proves something she's been trying not to admit. Her war isn't only against Voldemort, it's against the story her family told her about what power is for. And when Harry lies in the hospital wing, downplaying what he faced, and Ron jokes weakly about giant chess pieces, Hermione sits there with a different revelation. Loyalty doesn't have to be purchased with fear or bound by blood. It can be chosen, it can be messy, poor, infuriating, and still worth burning your inheritance for. Surviving first year doesn't just make her braver, it gives her evidence. Evidence that there is a world of sacrifice and love outside the House of Black, and that she can stand in it. But because she's still a Black, still bound by expectations and betrothal plans, and a family watching from the shadows, the real question isn't whether she'll go back for second year. It's what happens when her family realizes that Hogwarts isn't reforming Hermione Black into a perfect pureblood heir, it's tempting her to defect. So, let's explore what that means when the Chamber of Secrets opens, and the war for her soul stops being theoretical. Interlude: How a pureblood Hermione changes Harry and Ron. Hermione Black defecting isn't just a personal crisis. It quietly rewires the emotional gravity of the trio, because when the brightest witch of her age carries the Black family crest, every choice she makes pulls Harry and Ron into a different orbit. Start with Harry. Canon Harry meets pureblood power mostly as a fist in his face. Malfoy in Madame Malkin's, Snape in the classroom, Lucius at Flourish and Blots. Pureblood means danger, humiliation, and adults who decide his fate without ever really seeing him. In this timeline, his first sustained experience of that world isn't Draco's drawl. It's Hermione's cool, precise voice explaining why House Black funds certain laws, and why those laws are monstrous. This changes everything about how he maps the wizarding world. He doesn't file pure blood under enemy and move on. He files it under complicated. Hermione is proof that privilege can be both a weapon and a wound. She knows which cousins sit on which boards, which families bankroll which Wizengamot blocks. Means he learns in first year that the Ministry isn't just a building, it's a battlefield of surnames. Pattern interrupt. Imagine Harry in the common room, homework abandoned, while Hermione diagrams bloodline alliances on parchment the way she once diagrammed sentence structure. He's not just learning spells, he's learning strategy. Ron's journey gets messier. Growing up poor in a pure-blood family already means he carries a quiet resentment of people who have more galleons, more heirlooms, more respect. Canon gives him Malfoy as the safe target for that anger. In this story, one of his best friends is the heiress to a house his father despises. This isn't a story about Ron simply getting over it. Hermione's wealth and status press on every bruise he has about hand-me-downs and being just Ron Weasley when she casually references a Black property or an old grimoire. He hears the echo of every time his parents were sneered at in Diagon Alley. But because she's also the girl who stays up late helping Ginny with charms, who flinches when her mother's howler arrives. That resentment curdles into something more complicated: guilt, protectiveness, and a fear he'll never quite be her equal. Hermione's political awareness accelerates both boys. Canon Harry stumbles into understanding class and blood prejudice through experience. Dobby, the Malfoys, the Crouch House elf. Here, Hermione is naming systems from day one. She can explain why House Black backed certain anti-Muggle-born regulations and how those policies enrich a handful of families while everyone else fights over scraps. Means Harry starts asking different questions. Not just, how do we stop Voldemort, but who benefits if he wins? Who benefits if he falls? Ron, dragged into these conversations at the chessboard, ends up far more strategically literate, even if half his contributions begin with, "That's mental, Hermione." All of this shifts the trio's power balance. Instead of Hermione as the brilliant outsider with books and moral clarity, she arrives with books, moral clarity, and old black resources, hidden libraries, safe houses she's heard whispered about, access to information even Dumbledore doesn't have. On paper, that's an upgrade. In practice, it means surveillance. It means cousins watching her, owls intercepted, family magic that can trace where she's been. So the arguments change. They don't just fight about whether using polyjuice is too risky. They fight about whether to use a black family wardstone to shield the Gryffindor dorm, knowing it might ping on some ancestral ledger at Grimmauld Place. Harry's instinct is to use whatever will protect people now. Ron's instinct is to ask, and what will it cost us later? Hermione stands between them, torn between weaponizing the very system she's trying to dismantle and refusing tools that could save lives. That tension is the seed of a much bigger question as the war approaches. How far can they trust Hermione's judgment when the battlefield runs straight through her family tree? When the Order needs intel on a Death Eater gathering and the only way in is through a black cousin's good graces, does Harry follow Hermione's lead, or Ron's suspicion? Because the closer Voldemort coils around House Black, the more every mission becomes a referendum on Hermione herself. Is she their greatest asset, or the crack in their defenses waiting to be exploited? So, let's explore what happens the first time that question stops being hypothetical and nearly gets one of them killed. Year 2. The Heir of Slytherin meets the Heiress of Black. The first time a Muggle-born is found petrified, Hermione already knows what the whispers will say. Of course, it's the Heir of Slytherin. Of course, it's about blood. And of course, in a castle where portraits still remember her great-grandfather's toasts to purity, the name Black suddenly feels very, very loud. In canon, Hermione Granger is automatically on the side of the hunted. Here, Hermione Black walks the corridor between predator and prey. She hears the hissed rumors before Harry and Ron do, that old families have secrets, that the Chamber of Secrets was never meant to be a children's story, that a black heiress in Gryffindor is either a disgrace or a perfect cover. What if the heir had an ally wearing red and gold? This isn't a story about easy suspicion falling on the obvious targets. It's about how prejudice bends itself into new shapes to protect its own. Because the attacks are on Muggle-borns, the pure-blood students' close ranks. Publicly, they're horrified. Privately, they're calculating. If Slytherin's monster is real, whose family history suddenly matters most? Hermione knows the answer before Draco smirks it across the Great Hall. At Black family gatherings, the chamber was a cautionary legend, told with a certain pride. Salazar's great work. Parseltongue spoken of not as a curse, but as an inheritance wasted on that Potter boy. Growing up, Hermione learned the dates and lineages the way other children learned fairy tales. Now those same stories are stalking the corridors, turning her childhood curriculum into a suspect profile. She is horrified by the attacks. She is equally horrified by the small, treacherous part of her that recognizes the logic behind them. Not agrees. Recognizes. That's the difference that keeps her awake at night. Because if she can follow the ideology, if she can anticipate the moves of whoever opened the chamber, what does that say about the soil she was planted in? Draco makes sure she can't ignore it. Their arguments stop being abstract debates and start drawing blood. He corners her outside potions, voice low and vicious. Why does she care so much about the mudbloods? Is she trying to impress her little Gryffindor pets, betraying her blood for a Weasley and a half-blood celebrity? In canon, their spats are schoolyard rivalries. Here, every word is a referendum on their grandparents. Means he isn't just mocking her friends, he's accusing her of treason against a sacred 28 name. Means she isn't just snapping back, she's threatening his entire worldview by existing. So, let's explore what she does with that pressure. Hermione doesn't retreat, she weaponizes it. If the chamber is bound up with old magic and older families, then fine, she has an old family. She has access to the Black Library, to dust-choked volumes on Parseltongue lore, on Slytherin's estate holdings, on wards keyed to blood and language. The same shelves that taught Sirius what to run from now teach Hermione what to hunt. She drags Harry and Ron into research that canon Hermione could never have reached. Secret black genealogies that trace back to Gaunts. Half-censored letters mentioning the last of Slytherin's true kin. A throwaway line about a girl possessed by a voice in the walls decades ago that never made it into any Hogwarts history. And as the clues tighten, the real horror lands. If the Heir is unmasked as a pure-blood extremist, it won't just damn one student. It will indict a culture. It will point back to drawing rooms she's eaten dinner in, to relatives who toasted her birth. Solving the mystery doesn't just mean stopping a monster. It means putting her entire upbringing on trial. So when Hermione finally realizes where the trail is leading, the question isn't only who is the heir, it's what happens to me and my house when everyone else finds out what I already know. Polyjuice, prejudice, and a mirror held up to the Black's panic. She doesn't go to Harry and Ron with wide-eyed panic. She goes to them with a plan. With Polyjuice potion. In canon, that plan is about spying on Malfoy because he's an obvious suspect. Here, it's sharper, more personal. What if the point isn't just, is Draco the heir? What if, for Hermione Black, the point is, does Draco actually believe what our family taught us? And what does that make me? This isn't a story about a schoolgirl prank. It's a controlled experiment in ideology. She sells it logically, of course. If Malfoy knows anything, they'll hear it. If he's innocent, they can cross him off the list. But because this Hermione grew up at Grimmauld Place, listening to Aunt Wahlberger's portrait rant about filth and traitors, there's another layer she doesn't say out loud. If Draco parrots those same words, if he revels in the fear stalking the corridors, then the monster in the walls isn't the only thing she has to confront. The monster might be the culture that raised her. The brewing montage hits different. In Moaning Myrtle's bathroom, Harry is nervous. Ron is complaining about the smell, and Hermione is meticulous. Of course she is. But there's a moment where Ron jokes that she's awfully keen to turn into a Slytherin, and she goes very still before snapping back that someone in this family has to clean up their messes. It lands as half humor, half confession. Under the Polyjuice, as she listens behind the green-draped four posters, the test finally runs. Draco brags. He boasts about teaching mudbloods their place, about what my aunt says will happen when the old ways return. He isn't the heir. He's too clueless for that, but he believes. He's proud. He quotes Black rhetoric almost word for word, and Hermione, sitting there in another girl's face, hears her childhood dinner conversations echoed back as threats. This changes everything, because it means the ideology she's been slowly, stubbornly rejecting isn't abstract. It's active. It's hurting people she's trying to protect. When she sheds the potion and the scales and the Slytherin uniform, she doesn't just feel physically ill. She's grieving. For Draco. For the boy he might have been if he hadn't grown up marinating in the same poison. For the version of herself that could so easily have been sitting beside him, laughing. So, let's explore the attack. In this timeline, the heir doesn't see Hermione as collateral. He sees her as a traitor. A black heiress standing with Muggle-borns. That's not an inconvenience. That's blasphemy. When she pieces together the basilisk clue, clutching that torn page about giant serpents and killing gazes, she's not just getting too close to the truth. She's committing ideological treason. The petrification scene becomes a symbolic execution that fails by inches. She's found rigid in the corridor, eyes wide, hand frozen around that page. The ink is smudged where her thumb pressed hard over one word. Blood. McGonagall's reaction is not calm professor concern. It's political horror. A black, downed in the corridors for defending Muggle-borns, means headlines, Wisengamot debates, old alliances cracking. Dumbledore, already on thin ice with the pure blood block, stares at Hermione's still form and knows this isn't just about a monster in the plumbing. It's about the future of House Black's legacy. And far away, in a different drawing room, the family reads the news and draws their own conclusions. In the hospital wing, Hermione lies petrified, fingers locked around that basilisk page, half warning, half indictment. At Hogwarts, she's a near martyr for Muggle-borns. In Black circles, she's something far more dangerous. A precedent. The question is, when she finally wakes, which version of Hermione Black will the world allow her to be? Year 3. Time Turners, Sirius revealed, and family truths. When Hermione wakes, the world is already afraid. Dementors on the train, whispers in the Great Hall, and over it all, the same name hissed and hungry, Sirius Black. In this timeline, the Ministry's panic doesn't arrive in a vacuum. It lands on a girl whose family has been preparing for this exact fear her entire life. Owls from Grimmauld Place find her within days. Bellatrix's jagged handwriting, Narcissa's elegant script, even a surprisingly formal note from Draco, all saying the same thing in different tones: the murderous traitor has escaped. He killed your cousin. He betrayed the Dark Lord. He might come for you. For the new Black heir, this isn't abstract. This is bedtime story monster turned real. Growing up, Sirius wasn't a tragic cautionary tale. He was the family's shame weaponized into a warning. This is what happens when you betray your blood. This is what happens when you love the wrong people. So when McGonagall pulls Hermione aside and explains the security measures, Hermione isn't thinking about Harry first. She's thinking, what if he wants to finish the job? What if the cousin who ran away now wants to erase the girl who replaced him? Fear, for once, makes her quiet instead of argumentative. She sits closer to Harry and Ron at meals. She memorizes patrol routes, not just for safety, but because that's what a Black does when hunted. You prepare, you control what you can. But because she's Hermione, she also notices cracks. The way Lupin flinches at Sirius's name, not with hatred, but with something rawer. The way the Ministry's version of events feels convenient. The way Dumbledore's eyes are too still when he says, "Some truths are complicated, Miss Black." This isn't a story about instant conversion. It's a slow, grinding dissonance. A Daily Prophet article that doesn't match what her parents once muttered about the Potters. A defense lesson where Lupin praises James with such warmth that the idea of him befriending a frothing murderer strains credulity. Tiny details stacking. Then the shrieking shack blows everything open. Canon gives us a terrified Muggle-born trying to protect Harry. Here we get something sharper when Sirius snarls, "I'm not going to hurt you." He isn't just talking to James's son. He's staring at the girl with black eyes and black cheekbones, wand raised with pure blood precision. Means he is begging the last Black who might listen. "What did they tell you about me, little cousin?" he asks, voice cracking on cousin. He lists the lies he knows they fed her. That he betrayed the Dark Lord, that he murdered for sport, that he spat on his blood. Hermione fires back, demanding proof, demanding logic, because that's the only shield she has against the possibility that her entire childhood narrative is rotten. The Time Turner sequence turns that possibility into certainty. Watching the past from the shadows, she doesn't just see a man fighting off Dementors. She sees a godfather trying to reach his godson. She hears Snape's venom and realizes how much the adults in this war are still fighting school rivalries. She watches Fudge refuse evidence because it would embarrass the Ministry. This changes everything. If they lied about Sirius, what else did they twist? Voldemort, the war, her parents' heroics. And in the hospital wing, when Dumbledore hints that someone could save an innocent man, Hermione doesn't hesitate because of Harry. She hesitates because of her crest. Helping Sirius means aligning herself with a blood traitor. It means choosing the cousin her parents burned off the tapestry over the aunts who raised her. She chooses. When she mounts Buckbeak behind Harry, her decision is already made. She isn't just rescuing a wrongly imprisoned man. She's claiming a new branch of the Black legacy. One that says family isn't obedience, it's who you protect when it costs you everything. So let's explore what happens when the brightest Black decides her house has been telling the wrong story all along. Analytical interlude. The political fallout of Hermione backing Sirius. In that instant on Buckbeak's back, the war stops being abstract. A schoolgirl's rebellion turns into a declaration of allegiance. And in pure blood Britain, that doesn't stay secret for long. What happens when word gets out that Hermione Black helped Sirius escape a Ministry-sanctioned execution? Because it will. Maybe it's a whisper from a terrified clerk at the Committee for Magical Creatures. Maybe it's Lucius, piecing together timelines and asking one pointed question too many. Either way, the Black family hears the Golden Heir has backed the traitor. For the older Blacks and their allies, this isn't teenage impulsiveness. This is treason. You can almost hear Aunt Walburga's portrait shrieking through the halls of Grimmauld Place, even if she's long gone in this timeline. Outrage comes first. Threats of disinheritance, talk of betrothals to steady her, owls heavy with howlers and legal documents. Fear comes second. Because if Hermione, the model child of the new generation, can look at Sirius and see family worth protecting instead of blood traitor, what does that say about the story they've been telling their children for decades? This isn't a story about a lone rebel storming the gates. It's about contagion. Other sacred 28 houses start watching their daughters and cousins more closely. The Greengrasses, the Knotts, the Parkinsons, everyone tightens curfews, controls correspondence, increases pressure. They don't just want to rein Hermione in, they want to make sure there isn't another Hermione hiding at their own dinner table. Dumbledore, of course, is watching all this with that maddening layered calm. On parchment, having both Sirius and Hermione Black in the Order's orbit is a strategist's dream. One is the disowned heir who knows the rot from the inside. The other is the current darling of pure blood society, top of her year, fluent in the language of family honor and obligation. Together, they give him leverage no canon timeline ever had, a way to reach both the disaffected and the respectable. But because Dumbledore is Dumbledore, he also sees the cost. Every move Hermione makes now paints a brighter target on her back. To Voldemort, she becomes a future rival or a prize to corrupt. To Fudge, and later Umbridge, she's something even scarier. A respectable Black who might stand up in public and say calmly that the system is broken. Imagine Fudge hearing rumors that Miss Hermione Black argued procedural law with a senior Auror during the fallout from Sirius's escape, that she quoted obscure statutes about due process and wrongful imprisonment, that she walked away unscathed because her surname opened doors. This changes everything. A radical from the margins is easy to discredit. A radical from the drawing rooms of Belgravia equivalent wizarding London, that's a threat to the whole story the Ministry tells about order and safety. Umbridge, when she arrives, would clock Hermione in a heartbeat, not just as a troublemaker, but as a girl who could in 10 years be sitting on the Wizengamot arguing for Muggle-born rights with the weight of House Black behind her. Means she becomes a project, someone to humiliate, contain, or quietly break before she grows into that potential. And then there's the Malfoy household. For Draco, Hermione's alliance with Sirius isn't just politics, it's personal betrayal. This is the cousin who bested him in class, who knew the same nursery rhymes and pureblood etiquette, who should have stood with him against blood traitors. Instead, she's chosen the family disgrace and the Weasley boy. Every time she walks through Hogwarts with her head high, she's proof that being a Black doesn't guarantee loyalty to Voldemort's cause. That stings. It also pushes him to double down. If Hermione is the Black who's gone wrong, Draco will prove he's the one who stayed true. Narcissa, though, plays a longer game. She understands exactly what Hermione represents. A bridge. A girl who can move between drawing rooms and Dumbledore's camp, who still calls some of the old guard aunt and uncle. Hermione choosing Sirius tells Narcissa two things at once. First, that the ideological grip of their generation is slipping. Second, that there might, one day, be a path out that doesn't end in Azkaban or exile. So she becomes more cautious, more observant. She starts asking, in the quiet of Malfoy Manor, which future will protect Draco best, and whether that future might, inconveniently, have Hermione Black in it. This moment, then, is a pivot in the whole war. Up to now, Hermione has been a brilliant student pushing against her upbringing, arguing with professors, bending rules for Hagrid and house elves. From this year on, she's something else. A political actor. Every essay she writes, every club she joins, every public argument she picks at Hogwarts ripples outward into drawing rooms, ministry offices, and order meetings. What if the brightest Black in Britain decides to put her name, her vault, and her legal brilliance behind reform? What if she doesn't? The war stops being just wands and prophecies. It becomes a battle over who gets to define what House Black means in this new timeline. And the next time Hermione walks into Grimmauld Place, she won't just be entering a house. She'll be stepping onto a battlefield that carries her own name. Year 4, Yule Ball Black Heiress on display. When Hermione Black steps into the Yule Ball, she isn't just a fourth year in dress robes, she's House Black walking on 2 feet. The room knows it. The Great Hall has been transformed into glittering winter, but beneath the frost and fairy lights, it's pure political theatre. Embassy tables of Durmstrang and Beauxbatons, ministry officials drifting between clusters of parents, old pure-blood families in the gallery, watching the Triwizard champions, and, just as closely, the heirs orbiting around them. This isn't a story about awkward teenagers dancing. It's a summit disguised as a school event. Canon Hermione has that breathtaking, insecure transformation. The girl who never thought of herself as pretty, suddenly walking down the stairs. Hermione Black arrives already trained in presentation. Perfect posture, perfect hair, charmed into sleek waves by a bored black house elf weeks earlier. She knows how to glide, how to nod, how to let her surname speak before she opens her mouth. But because she's been drilled in this since childhood, the scrutiny doesn't feel magical. It feels suffocating. Watch how quickly the sharks start circling. A not heir asking for the second dance, mentioning too casually that their grandmothers were friends. A rosier boy commenting on her arithmancy essay, then pivoting to inheritance law. Even a 7th-year Ravenclaw from an old family, weighing her the way he'd weigh a promising investment. They see a potential alliance, a vault, an ancient name that could tilt the board. She sees their fathers behind their eyes. Hermione dances, smiles, catalogues. She evaluates them with a cold, analytical eye. Blood status, voting blocks, family history of dark affiliations. Who would tolerate reform? Who would expect a wife to host Death Eaters in the drawing room? It's a spreadsheet in her head, except the numbers are people and the variables are her own future. And then there's Draco. In this timeline, he can't ignore her. She's the more powerful black heir, the cousin who outshines him academically and politically. When he asks her to dance, it's stiff, formal, almost resentful. On the floor, their steps match because they were drilled by the same etiquette tutor years apart. His fingers are careful on her waist. His voice is not. "So, cousin," he murmurs, enjoying being the main attraction. "Are you?" she counters, eyes still on the pattern of their feet. "Or does it bother you that tonight they're whispering about my prospects, not yours?" He flinches, just slightly. Then he leans in, voice lower. "Careful, Hermione. The more they want you, the more they'll decide who you're allowed to be." It's almost a warning. Almost. Later with Victor Crumb, the heir shifts. He asks her about the tournament, not her dowry. About runes, not her family tree. When he mispronounces Black with his accent, it's an accident, not a title. For a moment, she glimpses something dangerous. Herself, apart from the name on her ring. But the clearest warning comes from an unexpected corner. Snape intercepts her near the punch bowl, gaze flicking from her formal black crest to the cluster of watching parents. "Miss Black," he says softly, "visibility is a double-edged wand. Remember that those who applaud you tonight may expect you to bleed for them tomorrow." He walks away before she can answer. Standing in the middle of snow-dusted enchantments and swirling robes, Hermione understands something new. Growing up black means she's been treated as a piece on the board. The Yule Ball shows her the whole game. If she doesn't define herself politically and morally soon, the pureblood world will do it for her, slotting her into a marriage contract, a voting bloc, a future she didn't choose. This changes everything, because once Hermione Black sees the board, she has a choice: remain a beautifully carved pawn or start moving like a player. And the next move she makes, in the shadow of the third task, will tell the entire wizarding world which one she's chosen. SPEW, reimagined, from knitted hats to systemic revolution. So when she chooses her next move, it isn't a boy, or a class, or even a house. It's the elves. Because before Hermione Black ever reads a statistic in Hogwarts history, she has already watched a house elf die. Picture her at 8 years old in Grimmauld Place, peering through the banister while her mother's cousin snaps her wand and snarls at a trembling elf who dropped a black family heirloom. The punishment isn't a lecture. It's a curse that leaves the elf whimpering on cold stone, creature dragging the body away, muttering about blood traitors and proper respect. Canon Hermione meets house elf abuse as an abstract injustice. Hermione Black meets it as childhood wallpaper. This changes everything. Because when she gets to 4th year and sees Winky on the top box stairs, drunk on butterbeer and shame, she doesn't just see exploitation, she sees Grimmauld kitchen. She hears Wahlburger's portraits screaming about filthy servants. She hears Creature's rasping voice saying, "Miss must not watch, Miss must not interfere." So when she founds SPEW in this timeline, it isn't a punchline, and it isn't a pile of knitted hats. It's a cover. On the surface, it's still Hermione handing out badges, still Ron groaning, still Harry trying to be supportive while wondering how he became treasurer. But because she's a Black, because purebloods assume her politics before she ever speaks, she can do something Canon Hermione never could: build a quiet network under the protection of her own surname. She recruits carefully: a Hufflepuff whose aunt works in the Hogwarts kitchens, a Ravenclaw who's noticed how the plates refill before the doors even open, a bored prefect who owes her a favor. She talks to the elves who will talk back, the ones who flinch less around a black heir. She learns names, schedules, which portraits gossip, which passages avoid the main staircases. SPEW becomes less a club and more an information web threaded through corridors and sculleries. But there's a cost. Every whispered meeting is also a betrayal. Every question she asks about pay and freedom is a reminder that her entire childhood was built on unpaid labor she never refused. This isn't a story about an enlightened pureblood swooping in to save the poor oppressed elves. It's a story about complicity. The confrontation comes one Christmas at Grimmauld, long before the Order moves in. Hermione has stayed with the Blacks for the holidays. Sirius is still in Azkaban, the house still ruled by old magic and older grudges. She corners Creature in the pantry, desperate for allies, and starts explaining SPEW in that rapid, breathless way she gets when she's already 3 arguments ahead. "Miss speaks of freedom," Creature says finally, eyes glittering. But Miss ate Creature's food, wore clothes Creature washed, slept in a bed Creature made. Did Miss ever say no? Did Miss ever clean her own chamber? He isn't shouting, that's what makes it worse. He bows low and mocking. Miss wants to change the rules now that Miss is grown and powerful. How brave. It hits harder than any pureblood slur ever could, because he's right. She did benefit. She did look away. And now, any open rebellion she leads will be read not just as political dissent, but as treason against her family's entire way of life. Against the very system that kept her safe and comfortable while it crushed others. So she recalibrates. Less public crusade, more subversion. She drafts charters and contracts in the margins of arithmancy homework, testing binding clauses that could replace life debts with employment terms. She listens when McGonagall makes a dry comment about staffing shortages and hears an opening, not a complaint. She starts imagining treaties, not petitions. Means she isn't just thinking about freeing one elf, she's thinking about how to rewire the magic that makes their bondage possible. And in the background, war gathers. When the Order finally claims Grimmauld as headquarters, when house elves become messengers and spies and collateral damage, SPEW's quiet network suddenly matters, in ways no one predicted. Hermione's little society starts feeding the Order roots. Overheard conversations, supply lines through the kitchens no Death Eater ever thinks to ward. What if the girl who organized revision schedules also organized resistance cells? What if the witch who cried over Winky in the stands becomes the architect of post-war labor law? Because that's where this is heading. The same mind that will one day track Horcruxes is already mapping power flows in Hogwarts plumbing. So let's explore what happens when her war isn't just on dark wizards, but on the invisible magic that props their world up. And the next time she walks into the Hogwarts kitchens, she won't be alone, and the elves won't be either. The graveyard and the mark, Voldemort's interest in a black prodigy. The next time she walks into the Hogwarts kitchens, the dark mark is back in the sky. Not over the school yet, over a graveyard in Little Hangleton, hanging above Harry's memory and Hermione's bruised ribs, a brand new scar on the timeline. Because Voldemort doesn't just return in this world, he returns already asking one question: where is the black girl who chose Gryffindor? Canon Voldemort, in that circle of cowed Death Eaters, takes stock of who crawled back and who ran. Here, he also takes stock of who defected. He remembers Sirius Black's laugh in the courtroom, the scandal of a disowned heir. He's heard whispers from Azkaban about a child at Grimmauld Place who argued with portraits before she could read. Means he looks around that graveyard and thinks, very coldly, the House of Black is fractured, but not finished. This isn't a story about Voldemort being irrationally obsessed with a schoolgirl. It's about strategy. A black heiress in Gryffindor, standing beside Harry Potter, publicly siding with Sirius? That's not teenage rebellion. That's a political earthquake. This changes everything about how he reads his own war. So, let's explore the conversations that happen in the shadows after the graveyard. Bellatrix, still in Azkaban, feels the mark burn and laughs until her voice cracks. A black girl in Gryffindor is an insult. A black prodigy is an opportunity. In her mind, Hermione is a weapon that's simply been misplaced. Imagine her pressing her forehead to the cold stone, whispering through the bars, "My clever little cousin has been playing house with blood traitors. I'll bring her home. I'll teach her what our name means." For Bellatrix, reclaiming Hermione isn't optional. It's a sacred duty twisted into fanaticism. Lucius Malfoy, by contrast, is all calculation. At the next masked gathering, he murmurs about the black girl with that careful drawl, a potential bridge to wavering purebloods, or a rival center of gravity. He suggests she could be turned, or failing that, neutralized before she rallies the old families around Dumbledore. Every word is a hedge. Every suggestion is also a test. How much does his master value this particular black? And then, there's Snape. He watches his arm darken, feels the mark's call, and thinks of a girl in his classroom who quotes 18th century black family treatise at him while correcting his footnote on goblin rebellions. He knows exactly how dangerous she'll be to Voldemort if she stays with Dumbledore, and how tempting she'll be to Voldemort if she doesn't. In this version, the warning he brings to Dumbledore isn't just "he's back," it's very quietly, "he will come for the black girl. You must protect her." For Hermione, the Dark Mark's return hits on a different frequency. That skull and serpent isn't only the emblem that haunted her childhood nightmares, it's a deformation of symbols she was raised to revere. The Blacks told her ancient stories about serpents as guardians of knowledge, skulls as memento mori for noble sacrifice. Now she's seen what Voldemort does with those myths. She's watched Cedric fall. She's heard the casual contempt in Voldemort's voice when he names the old families as tools. Back at Hogwarts, when the shock wears off and the pain in her body settles into a dull ache, she makes a private vow. If Voldemort wants the Blacks, he will not have her. If he wants their vaults, their alliances, their dark libraries, she will burn every bridge she has to. She will turn every resource of her house against him, even if it means tearing its legacy down to the foundations. Because in this war, both sides have now circled her name. To Voldemort, Hermione Black is a prize or a threat. To Dumbledore, she's an asset he cannot afford to lose. To the Order, she's suddenly not just a student, but a potential successor, a symbol, a bargaining chip. And going into 5th year, the most dangerous thing isn't that everyone wants to win her. It's that no one has yet asked what happens if she refuses to belong to anyone at all. Year 5. Hermione Black versus Dolores Umbridge. Hermione walks into 5th year knowing one thing with terrifying clarity. Everyone wants to own her. The Ministry wants her surname. The Order wants her mind. Voldemort wants her bloodline. And then Dolores Umbridge walks in, all pink and poison, and wants something far more insidious. What if the enemy this year isn't a dark lord in the shadows, but a smiling bureaucrat who thinks she can domesticate a black heiress? This changes everything about how Hermione has to fight. Voldemort would kill or convert. Umbridge would co-opt or crush. She represents a different strain of blood prejudice, one wrapped in law and order and standards, where pure blood means useful ornament rather than sacred cause. A brilliant, impeccably bred girl from the House of Black, publicly attached to Dumbledore's camp, but not yet branded as a traitor. A perfect poster child for Ministry-approved youth. So Umbridge starts small, compliments in class. Such a credit to your family, Miss Black. Invitations to her office. Thin china teacups, thickly sugared flattery, subtle digs at confused half-bloods and hysterical Muggle-borns. Offered as if Hermione must of course agree. Hermione smiles. She uses the old lessons drilled into her at Grimmauld Place. The pure-blood drawl, the careful posture, the way to turn a phrase so it sounds respectful while saying nothing at all. To Umbridge, she presents the perfect, polite, pure-blood student. To Harry and Ron, she presents color-coded schedules and whispered plans. Because under the lace and lies, she's quietly mapping out resistance. This isn't a story about Hermione abandoning politics for secret homework clubs. It's about her weaponizing every inch of her upbringing. When she proposes Dumbledore's army, she doesn't just argue for practical defense. She frames it as preserving traditional dueling standards and upholding Hogwarts' historic reputation. Means she can recruit wary purebloods who'd never join a group that sounded openly rebellious, but will absolutely join something that sounds prestigious. Pattern interrupt. Imagine the DA's founding meeting, but instead of a nervous group in the Hog's Head, it's Hermione Black standing in the center of the room, calmly invoking her ancestors. My family signed half the dueling codes in Europe. I'm telling you what Umbridge is doing isn't education, it's control. Suddenly, even Slytherins have to listen. Umbridge notices. Of course she does. So she escalates. She offers Hermione a role on the Inquisitorial Squad, framed as a chance to restore proper discipline and correct Professor Dumbledore's excesses. She hints at Ministry internships, Wizengamot sponsorships, a future in policy where Hermione could really make a difference if she just learned to be practical. Hermione's refusal isn't loud, it's surgical. In one office meeting, she asks, very softly, why certain Death Eater families have had their trials misplaced. She references a Black family ledger entry about donations to key officials during the First War. She notes, with perfect politeness, that some of those names now sit in the minister's inner circle. For a heartbeat, Umbridge's smile cracks. Hermione sees it, files it away, presses harder. By the time she leaves that office, Umbridge has marked her, not as a silly, emotional girl following Dumbledore, but as a dangerous operator with receipts. Punishments intensify. Detentions with that quill, extra inspections of her mail, whispered threats about her guardians. Umbridge starts watching Hermione the way she watches Dumbledore, as a rival center of gravity. And that pressure doesn't tame Hermione Black. It pushes her into open resistance and drags the whole school along with her. Dumbledore's army, a Black leading the wrong sort, so when Hermione Black walks into the Hog's Head and quietly shuts the door behind her, it doesn't feel small, it feels seismic. What if the name that's haunted the Daily Prophet for 2 generations suddenly became the rallying point for a student rebellion? Canon gives us a ragtag meeting led by Harry, awkward and defensive. Here, Hermione positions herself by the grimy window, cloak drawn tight, and waits until the muttering dies. She doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't need to. The Ministry is lying, she says, precise and cold. Umbridge is dismantling your education. We're going to replace it. When a Black heiress proposes a secret defense association, every pure blood in the room stiffens. Every Muggle-born remembers the tapestry in Grimmauld Place. This isn't a story about a plucky outsider begging to be taken seriously. This is the scion of House Black, declaring open defiance. And because of who raised her, she's terrifyingly good at it. Hermione has been drilled in pure-blood etiquette and formal dueling since childhood. Bellatrix taught her stance by correcting it with the tip of a wand. Narcissa taught her how to read a room and make people underestimate her. Sirius in Stolen Afternoons taught her how to break every rule those lessons were built on. So, in the Room of Requirement, when she demonstrates a shield charm, it's not a textbook flourish. It's a Black family form, tightened and repurposed, snapping into place with military precision. The Slytherins who slipped in out of curiosity recognize it. The Hufflepuffs and Muggle-born Ravenclaws just see that it works. This changes everything about how the DA sees her. The same surname that made them whisper now means survival. Zacharias Smith might still snipe, but when Hermione disarms him 3 times in a row without breaking eye contact, even he shuts up. Respect is earned in Spellfire, but trust, that's slower. There are late-night whispers near the cushions at the back. Can you really trust a Black with a list of Muggle-borns learning to fight? What if this is all a trap? Hermione hears fragments, because of course she does. And it hits a raw nerve. She's using stances Bellatrix praised, breathing patterns her grandfather's dueling master beat into her shoulders, to arm the people her family calls mudbloods. The irony tastes metallic. It also keeps her going. One night, after a particularly brutal Patronus session, she stops the group. Wands down. No spell work, just words. You need to understand something, she says. Magic isn't in your surname. It's not in vaults or tapestries. It's in repetition, and in what you do with it. My family used these spells to protect power. We're going to use them to protect each other. There's a pause. Then a first-year Muggle-born asks, very small, even us. Hermione doesn't hesitate. Especially you. Means he walks out of that room knowing House Black just chose his life over its own reputation. And the Room of Requirement responds. Gradually, its walls shift. Old Black dueling dummies stand beside battered school desks. A faded tapestry of constellations hangs opposite a hand-painted banner that just says, DA. In here, Hermione isn't the Black heiress under Ministry scrutiny. She's the center of a new mixed blood resistance, a generation learning that power can be taught, shared, redirected. So, let's explore what happens when that hidden army collides with a regime that thought it had already tamed Hogwarts. Department of Mysteries, between Bellatrix and Sirius. The regime thinks it's tamed Hogwarts. The Ministry thinks it owns the narrative. And then the Department of Mysteries' doors slam open, And in walks the one black heir they never accounted for, Hermione. This isn't a story about a schoolyard DA sneaking into a battle they don't understand. In this timeline, the raid on the Ministry is a family reckoning wrapped in a rescue mission. Hermione steps into the echoing stone corridors, already braced for two faces. The cousin who proved a black can walk away, and the aunt who proved a black can enjoy murder. She's not just wondering, will we get Harry out? She's wondering, what if both versions of my future are waiting for me in the same room? The descent itself changes everything. Canon Harry tumbles down those spinning rooms half-blind with panic. Here, Hermione is reciting floor plans Sirius traced on napkins at Grimmauld Place. Wand out, voice steady because she grew up learning to walk black corridors without flinching. But because she's a black, every whisper in the dark feels personal. Prophecy room, veil chamber, hall of time. These aren't abstract mysteries. They're tests of what she believes power and destiny mean. When the ambush hits, it's not Lucius who steps forward first, it's Bellatrix. She clocks Hermione's posture, the tilt of her chin, the way the other Death Eaters hesitate around her. There she is, Bellatrix purrs, curses idly carving sparks into the floor. The wayward black, playing resistance with blood traitors and half-breeds when she could be a queen. The duel is vicious and intimate. Bellatrix doesn't just fling unforgivables, she narrates them. See, little niece, this is what our magic can do when you stop apologizing for it. She offers terms mid-curse. Kneel now, bring the prophecy to Voldemort, and he'll make her his brilliant pureblood protégé. It's everything a black heiress is supposed to want, weaponized. And Hermione feels, with nauseating clarity, that if you twist her hunger for knowledge just a few degrees, Bellatrix is what you get. Then Sirius barrels in, reckless and incandescent, hurling a spell that knocks Bellatrix off her feet and cuts the offer in half. For a heartbeat, Hermione sees them framed together, the mad aunt and the laughing cousin, two branches of the same family tree. Means he is proof she can choose something else. Means Bellatrix is proof the tree still poisons everything it touches. Bellatrix goes for Harry, for Neville, for anyone who will hurt Hermione most. She toys with them, crucias drawn out, eyes on Hermione the whole time. This is the future you're throwing away, she says, as Sirius shouts hoarse warnings and drags Hermione behind cover. When the curse finally hits him, when he falls through the veil with that look of surprised, betrayed joy, Hermione's world contracts to a single ringing absence. In canon, Harry's grief is raw and feral. Here, Hermione's is surgical and specific. She's lost the only adult black who ever made tea instead of threats, who turned Grimmauld Place from a mausoleum into a home, who showed her that family could mean bad jokes, mismatched mugs, and a motorbike in the kitchen, not just portraits that scream about purity. She stands before the veil afterward, the battle noise dimmed to a distant roar, and understands something Bellatrix never will. The Black legacy isn't a bloodline, it's a choice repeated across generations. Walburga chose cruelty, Bellatrix chose worship, Sirius chose defiance. What if Hermione chooses reconstruction? She doesn't speak, she doesn't need to. The promise she makes is wordless and furious. Bellatrix Lestrange will not be the last definition of Black history remembers. If Hermione has to burn down half the old world and rebuild it from the Ashwender up, she will. If she has to wield the very darkness Bellatrix offered and bend it toward protection instead of domination, she will. So, let's explore what happens when that promise meets an order that still doesn't quite trust her. A wizened Gamot built on black gold, and a dark lord who suddenly realizes His most dangerous potential lieutenant has chosen to become his judge. Interlude: War Hermione versus Canon Hermione. Put Canon Hermione and Hermione Black side by side at the start of 5th year, and, at first glance, they almost rhyme. Same brilliance, same color-coded revision schedules, same instinct to organize resistance before most adults admit there's a war. But because the girl in this timeline grew up under the Black family crest, instead of a dentist's brass plaque, the leader she becomes is sharper-edged, more dangerous, and far less willing to believe that being right will ever be enough. Canon Hermione walks into the war still half believing that if you write enough letters, if you form enough committees, the system will eventually listen. She found out about Fudge's corruption from the outside in. Hermione Black has watched pure-blood politics from the inside out since childhood. She knows which Wizengamot seats are bought with donations, which old men toasted Voldemort in private, and the boy who lived in public. This isn't a story about a clever schoolgirl stumbling into resistance. This is a young aristocrat weaponizing everything her family taught her and turning it against them. Because here's the other difference. Canon Hermione's stake is moral and personal, but abstract at first. She's outraged on principle. Hermione Black has skin in the game in a way that hurts. She's been branded a traitor at the family table, watched her name scorched off a tapestry she once traced with childish fingers, and then lost Sirius, the one Black who chose her, back through the veil. That combination of intimate betrayal and grief means she doesn't just want Voldemort defeated, she wants the ideology that killed Sirius and groomed Bellatrix shattered, root and branch. So when the war heats up, her tactics shift. Canon Hermione found SPEW and legal reform. She used rules as a ladder, even when she broke them. Hermione Black uses the same intellect to draft ironclad contracts that trap neutral purebloods, to threaten Malfoy investments with a single redirected Black vault, to quietly collect evidence for blackmail on a senior Auror who keeps losing Death Eater files. She won't Crucio, but she will ensure your son's marriage prospects vanish overnight if you fund the wrong cause. Her relationship with rules has been a whole journey. Growing up, she followed them to earn Black approval, perfect posture, perfect grades, never speak of Muggle-borns as anything but inferior. Hogwarts and Harry cracked that. She became a rule breaker for friends. Polyjuice in 2nd year, Firebolt inspections in 3rd, the DA in 5th. By the time the war is official, she's moved past breaking rules to bending systems, reinterpreting ancient Black bylaws to funnel gold to the Order, using pureblood etiquette as both shield and knife. And her position in this timeline is uniquely volatile. She understands Death Eater culture from the inside, the private jokes, the harmless slurs at Christmas, the way fear and flattery keep people in line. She can predict which cousin will fold under pressure and which aunt will hide a fugitive for the sake of scandal. Yet she's throwing that knowledge behind Muggle-borns and half-bloods. To the Death Eaters, she's the most dangerous kind of traitor, one who knows where the bodies are buried. To the Order, she's a bridge into rooms they could never enter, and a reminder that some of their own prejudices wear better robes. Pattern interrupt. Imagine the Horcrux hunt with that girl in the tent. Canon Hermione fears failing exams, losing Harry, losing Ron. Hermione Black carries those, plus an additional dread, becoming what Bellatrix wanted her to be. Every dark spell in her repertoire, every calculated threat, brushes that line. She'll bring forged documents, Black safe houses the Order doesn't even know exist, and a working knowledge of cursed artifacts that makes Regulus's notes readable instead of fatal. But when food runs low and tempers snap, she's also the one who can say, with terrifying calm. We could end this faster if we stopped pretending everyone deserves a fair trial. This changes everything about how the trio moves underground. It means their arguments won't just be about where to go next, but about what kind of world they're willing to build on the other side. So, let's explore how Harry and Ron respond when the girl they trust most starts offering solutions that sound uncomfortably close to the people they're fighting. Year 6. Slughorn's Club and the Black in the Room. So when Slughorn sweeps back into Hogwarts, he doesn't just see a promising Muggle-born in the front row. He sees Hermione Black. He sees the crest, the pedigree, and the girl who outscored every Ravenclaw on his first quiz. What if, in his armchair calculus of influence, Hermione isn't a curiosity, but the crown jewel? In this timeline, his Slug Club dinners orbit around her. She's seated between a senior Department of Mysteries researcher who used to correspond with her grandfather and a publisher from Spellmaker Quarterly, eager to serialize a modern Black Witch's essays. Slughorn beams as he introduces her. Miss Hermione Black, a credit to her family and the brightest witch of her age. The room laughs politely when he adds, "You'll be minister by 40, my dear." Hermione smiles. The smile doesn't reach her eyes, because this isn't a story about harmless academic flattery. The way Slughorn fawns over her surname, the way he nudges her towards certain internships, certain Wizengamot sponsors, makes those evenings feel like the Yule Ball all over again. Only now the stakes are careers and laws, not dress robes and dates. She can feel the subtle pressure. Restore House Black's reputation. Become the acceptable pureblood future. Be useful. She notices which adults relax when she mentions Sirius, and which ones tense. She files away who praises her for transcending her family and who praises her for honoring it. Every compliment is a test. Every glass of crystallized pineapple is a reminder that she's being curated. And then there are the books. Canon Hermione has the restricted section. Hermione Black has trunks of family grimoires quietly moved from Grimmauld Place to Hogwarts under Sirius's signature. Old black treatises on soul binding, on anchoring will through vessels, on the ethics of fragmenting intent. Dry, euphemistic, terrifying. When Slughorn's muddled memory and Riddle's question about splitting the soul come up, she doesn't just flinch at the idea, she recognizes the vocabulary. This changes everything about the Horcrux hunt. It means she can connect Tom Riddle's polite inquiry to footnotes in black manuscripts, to half-burned diagrams her mother swore were historical only. It means when Harry and Dumbledore return from the cave, Hermione already has a framework for what they're fighting. She knows how a family can build an empire on the slow erosion of conscience. So when Harry starts relying on the Half-Blood Prince's textbook, her alarm isn't just about cheating or safety, it's about watching someone she loves delight in anonymous, unregulated spellcraft that feels uncomfortably close to what her relatives once called necessary pragmatism. She's seen what clever, unsupervised magic can do when paired with entitlement. She has blood proof. Their arguments over the book get sharper. Harry hears, "You don't trust me." Hermione is really saying, "I've seen what happens when people with my name decide the rules don't apply." But because she won't weaponize her trauma, as evidence, the subtext hangs between them, heavy and unspoken. Quietly, she starts building maps. Not just of possible Horcruxes, diadems, cups, lockets, but of Death Eater patronage webs she's overheard at Slug Club. Which black vaults hold cursed heirlooms? Which second cousins sit on which committees? Which assets can be flipped, frozen, or exposed when the time is right? Means she walks out of each Slug Club soiree with more than a full plate. She walks out with leverage. So, Let's explore what happens when war finally demands she spend it. Year 7. A Black on the run. Not in the Manor. Hermione spends 6th year quietly collecting leverage. 7th year begins with the world collecting her. When the Ministry falls in this timeline, it isn't just a regime change, it's a family coup. The new Muggle-born registration commission is public, brutal, and efficient. But because Hermione is a Black, her danger is stranger. Pure-blood fugitives whisper her name with fear and fascination. Death Eaters don't only want to kill her, they want to retrieve her, correct her, parade her as proof that even the brightest traitor can be brought home. This isn't a story about a girl hiding in a tent while history happens elsewhere. The Order needs Hermione Black on the board. She knows which Black cousins fund which front groups, which Wizengamot fossils will cave to pressure, which ancestral properties can be repurposed as safe houses or traps. She's the one who can say very calmly that if Yaxley is suddenly promoted, it means 3 specific families have fallen. Information is her wand arm, so when she vanishes with Harry and Ron, both sides start hunting. To Voldemort's people, capturing her would be a propaganda coup. To the Order, losing her would mean losing their best map of pure-blood power. Being a Black means she can bluff her way past some checkpoints with a sneer and a ring. It also means her face is on wanted notices in drawing rooms, not just in the Prophet. All of that collides at Malfoy Manor. Canon gives us a horrifying scene there. In this timeline, it's worse because the horror is domestic. Hermione isn't dragged into an unknown dungeon. She's marched through a front hall where she once slid down the banister as a child, past portraits who tut in disappointment instead of curiosity. Bellatrix doesn't just see a mudblood to carve up. She sees a niece who should have known better. The torture shifts tone. Bellatrix circles her, voice syrup-sweet and venomous, demanding she renounce Harry, denounce mudblood filth, reclaim her name properly. She presses her wand to Hermione's arm where a dark mark should be, and hisses that the family will forgive everything if she just comes home. Narcissa watches, white-knuckled. Draco can't quite meet her eyes. Hermione breaks. Outwardly, she cries, chokes, lets herself tremble. But because she grew up in these corridors, she also counts Bellatrix's pacing steps, notes which chandelier still hides the emergency ward key, remembers that the 3rd flagstone from the left in the cellar cracks louder than the others. She uses her Black surname as both shield and knife. She gasps that Harry tricked her, that she can help find him, that Auntie Bella should move the prisoners somewhere more secure than the cellar the house elves use. It's a performance tailored to Bellatrix's ego and to Malfoy paranoia. While Bellatrix preens, Hermione nudges the dynamics she knows too well. Draco's fear of Voldemort, Narcissa's terror for her son, Lucius's obsession with status, until they're all facing different directions. Then she turns her childhood home into a battlefield. She times the escape to when the wards cycle, something she only knows because she spent bored summers listening to Creature mutter about Master Orion's protections. She shouts a family override in archaic Black Latin that freezes the main staircase for 3 heartbeats. It's just enough. They get out. But she doesn't leave unmarked. The word Bellatrix carves into her arm is not mudblood, it's traitor. A family verdict, etched in pain. When Hermione staggers away from the manor, she is physically scarred and spiritually clarified. There is no going back to being a Black in any traditional sense. The name that once opened doors now opens wounds. So, let's explore what she does with a legacy that can no longer protect her, but can still topple the world if she chooses to spend it all at once. Battle of Hogwarts. Reclaiming the Black name on the front lines, she walks back into Hogwarts as Hermione Black. And for the first time, everyone knows exactly what that means. The battle doesn't begin with heroics. It begins with a calculation. Which corridors funnel pureblood strike teams fastest? Which secret passages would her aunts have used? Growing up at Grimmauld Place means she has spent years overhearing strategy disguised as dinner conversation. Now, in the Room of Requirement, she spreads a rough map and starts crossing out routes. "They'll come through here, and here," she says, tapping with the black signet ring. They were trained to. This isn't a story about Hermione simply fighting harder because she's angry. It's about her turning the entire pureblood playbook inside out. She stations Muggle-borns where the wards are weakest, not to sacrifice them, but because she knows which curses the Death Eaters will assume lesser blood can't counter. She pairs them with half-bloods who grew up hearing horror stories and are very motivated to prove those stories wrong. She sends Neville to the greenhouses because the old families underestimate plants. This changes everything about who survives the opening assault. On the third floor, she meets the first wave, masked blacks by marriage who once eyed her as a future bride. One of them hesitates when he recognizes her stance. "Lady Hermione," he starts. Almost polite, her answer is an old black family curse, ripped from the tapestry and turned on its former owners. It chains his wand arm to his side, the spell keyed to the blood in his veins. "You taught me this," she says coldly. "You should have been more careful what you handed your daughters." Because she understands their training, she anticipates the feints. She orders the younger students to fall back before the Carrow's favorite sadistic tricks even begin. She has the house elves move through the walls, relaying positions faster than any Patronus network. It's coordination, not just courage, that keeps the first hours from becoming a slaughter. In the chaos near the marble staircase, she slams into Narcissa and Draco, wands drawn, eyes wild. All three blacks for a heartbeat frozen in a broken family portrait. Draco's hand shakes, Narcissa's doesn't. "You could have had everything," Narcissa spits. Hermione laughs once, sharp. "You're losing the definition of everything by the minute." Then she does something no canon version of Hermione could. She offers them terms. "Stay with him," she says, jerking her head toward the dark mark burning overhead. "And you die with a dying ideology. Help us and your son walks out of this castle. Those are your options. It isn't mercy. It's a black making a deal in the middle of a war." Draco, who has spent an entire timeline watching her dismantle the assumptions he grew up with, flicks his wand aside first. Meanwhile, the Horcrux hunt is catching up with them. In stolen breaths between duels, Hermione is still the one putting the soul magic pieces together. She's the one who sat with Harry in the tent, walking him through what it means to deliberately tear your soul, what it means that Voldemort did it again and again. Means he isn't just evil, he's structurally incapable of understanding love, or sacrifice, or why Harry going into the forest might be the only way out. Her arguments don't make the choice for him, but they make it legible, survivable. By the time Voldemort falls, the Great Hall is a ruin of dust, blood, and broken banners. Hermione stands among the bodies and the living, the black signet ring on her finger smeared red, its crest almost unrecognizable. The old motto feels obscene on her skin, but she doesn't take it off. Because what if reclamation isn't about burning the tapestry, but about stitching new names into it? She looks up at the shattered Slytherin banners and knows one thing with brutal clarity. In this timeline, House Black will never mean the same thing again. The question is, in the fragile dawn after war, who will she allow it to become? Aftermath, trials, reforms, and the last black in the Wesengamot. In the weeks after Voldemort falls, Hermione discovers that victory doesn't sound like cheering. It sounds like parchment, quills, chains. The first time she takes the stand in a war crimes trial, the chamber is packed. Former Death Eaters in shackles press in the gallery, the tattered black family crest still hanging above the wizened gamut like an accusation. What if the key witness against half the defendants is a Black herself? What if the last scion of that house is the one unpicking its secrets in public? She testifies against Yaxleys and Knots, against men who toasted her christening, against a cousin who once taught her to waltz at a solstice ball and later taught first years how to cruciate Muggle-borns in the dungeons. She walks the court through private drawing rooms and unregistered flu connections, through the charitable foundations that were laundering gold for the cause. Her insider knowledge means there are no safe euphemisms left. She names names. She translates pure blood code into evidence. And then, because the timeline demands it, she testifies against Bellatrix. That's the pattern interrupt no one expected. The room holds its breath as Hermione Black, wand hand still scarred from Malfoy Manor, explains exactly how her aunt built a network of fanatics inside Azkaban and how those same fanatics groomed her as a child. This isn't a story about cathartic revenge. It's about a young woman dismantling the architecture that built her. Outside the trials, she refuses to let justice stop at punishment. She walks straight from the courtrooms into committee rooms. House elf rights, werewolf protections, anti-discrimination statutes that actually mention Muggle-borns by name. She drafts them all. Then she does the unforgivable in pure blood society. She uses the black vaults to fund them. Means she pays for legal aid offices in Nocturne Alley. Means she endows a Department for Magical Creatures Oversight Board and quietly insists on a house elf as its co-chair. This changes everything in the Wizengamot. She's the last black in the chamber, sitting where Arcturus once sat. But she refuses to vote as a block of one. She proposes term limits, transparent trials, a formal Muggle-born caucus. Old men splutter that she's tearing down centuries of tradition. She smiles, exhausted, and says that's rather the point. Of course, there's a cost. Every guilty verdict against a black ally is a small funeral for the world she grew up in. Family portraits vanish from Grimmauld walls as their subjects are sentenced to Azkaban or exile. At night, she walks those corridors and asks herself, what if she had stayed loyal? Would any of this hurt less? Or would it simply be quieter? Grimmauld Place itself becomes her answer. By blood and by Sirius's maddeningly sentimental will, she inherits the house and the fortune. She does not turn it into a museum of suffering. She turns it into a refuge and a school. Former house elves teach curse-breaking to war orphans in the old drawing room. A Muggle-born research collective occupies the library, annotating pure-blood texts with ballpoint pens. So, let's explore the tension this creates. Hermione Black is now a war hero, a legal reformer, and the wealthiest witch in Britain. The new society is being written in her handwriting. The danger is obvious. How long before the girl who broke the old elite becomes the nucleus of a new one? The section that follows will ask whether she can build structures strong enough that they don't need her, or whether, in trying to protect everyone, she risks becoming exactly what she fought. Alternate endgame. Could Hermione Black have ruled instead of reformed? Hermione Black wins the war. Voldemort is dead, the Death Eaters are scattered, and the girl who grew up under that blasted family tapestry is suddenly the safest person to put in charge. Or is she the most dangerous? What if, in the stunned weeks after the Battle of Hogwarts, she doesn't just draft bills and advise committees, but quietly accepts what everyone is already offering her: control? What if Kingsley, exhausted and pragmatic, says, We need someone uncompromising in magical law enforcement. And she hears, not a job, but a mandate. This changes everything, because now the brightest witch of her age is handed the levers of the state and told to pull hard. It would be so easy. She has black gold, black name, and war hero status. She can walk into Gringotts and the Ministry in the same morning and have both goblins and auras standing. She knows the pureblood codes from growing up in Grimmauld Place. She knows the loopholes from memorizing canon law at 12. Give that girl a high post, head of the DMLE, or a new war reconstruction authority, and watch decision-making quietly narrow to a small circle of reliable people who all just happen to be in her study at Grimmauld on Tuesday nights. In one darker timeline, she leans into it. She pushes for emergency powers that never quite sunset. She argues with perfect logic that Muggle-born registration is necessary, not to persecute, but to protect. She insists on oaths for senior officials, binding them to the greater good, and because she writes the wording, the greater good starts to sound suspiciously like Hermione Black's vision of order. It isn't cackling villainy, it's benevolent authoritarianism with color-coded files, and her pureblood upbringing makes that hierarchy feel natural. Of course, the enlightened few guide the many. She just believes she's enlightened in a way her parents and Bellatrix never were. Where they used family honor to crush, she uses it to compel service. Where they hid behind tradition, she hides behind statistics and policy drafts. This isn't a story about cartoon tyranny. It's about how easily "I know what's best" slips into "I decide what's allowed." But because she's still Hermione, the canon girl who founded SPEW and cried over house elves, there are moments in this AU where she stops herself. She invites Andromeda and Arthur into meetings even when pureblood protocol says they shouldn't be there. She publishes draft laws in the Prophet before they're passed, daring people to argue. She makes Harry and Ron formal co-signatories on key reforms, then refuses to override them when they say no. Each of those choices is a tiny rebellion against the black in her veins. Means she doesn't just defeat Voldemort's army. She fights the temptation to become its softer, smarter sequel. So, let's explore the knife's edge she's walking here. Because in a world begging Hermione Black to rule, the real question isn't whether she can share power. It's what happens the first time the world disappoints her, and she's offered the chance not to ask, but to command. Comparative lens. Canon Hermione versus Hermione Black across the 7 years. Canon gives us one Hermione. This timeline asks, what if the same soul had been planted in Black family marble, instead of a Muggle dentist's waiting room? This isn't a story about replacing her, it's about refracting her. So, year by year, let's hold canon Hermione and Hermione Black up to the same light and watch where the beams split. First year, troll in the bathroom. Canon Hermione lies to protect Harry and Ron because she's just discovered friendship is worth detention. Hermione Black? She's been trained that house is everything. She still lies, but frames it as a calculated move to shield a future political ally and preserve Gryffindor's honor. Same courage, same quick thinking, different internal script about loyalty and optics. Second year, the Chamber and Muggle-born attacks. Canon Hermione becomes the girl with the mirror and the library stack, driven by raw fear for people who share her blood status. Hermione Black is furious too, but because this is her house's ideology, taken to its ugliest extreme, she hunts the basilisk with a personal vendetta against the pureblood supremacists who would claim her as their own. For one Hermione, it's survival. For the other, it's a family civil war. Third year, Sirius. Canon Hermione sees a dangerous convict and the rulebook. Trust comes slowly after evidence. Hermione Black sees the name first. Black. Cousin. Scandal. She interrogates him with legal precision in the shrieking shack, half a raw, half disappointed air. And when she switches to his side, it's not just about justice for Harry. It's about choosing which Black legacy to inherit. 4th and 5th years bend harder. With the tournament and Umbridge, Canon Hermione builds resistance through organizations SPEW, then Dumbledore's army, still assuming at first that the Ministry can be reasoned with. Hermione Black never has that honeymoon phase with authority. Growing up watching the Wizengamot toast Death Eaters means she reads Umbridge as a weapon, not a teacher, from day one. She forms the DA as a counter-government, not an extracurricular. By 6th and 7th year, the Horcrux hunt, both Hermione's are the planners. Canon Hermione's rage is abstract. Injustice, genocide, the murder of her parents' world. Hermione Black's rage is intimate. Cousins, aunts, a family tree carved into the wall at Grimmauld Place. Canon Hermione packs a beaded bag. Hermione Black also packs a Rolodex of grudges and alliances. Relationships shift around that center. Draco goes from schoolyard antagonist to something far more fraught when he's her cousin. Someone she argues with in fluent pureblood code over dinner, then duels in corridors. Her partnership with Harry deepens into a political dyad. He's the symbol, she's the strategist, and they both know it. Ron feels the class tension more sharply. Canon Hermione and Ron fight over homework and feelings. Hermione Black and Ron also fight over the fact that her family's old money once bought his family's humiliation. Authority, too, is inverted. Canon Hermione begins as the girl who believes exams are fair and the Ministry mostly well-meaning, then loses that faith brick by brick. Hermione Black starts from skepticism, but for different reasons. She's seen how laws are written to protect people with names like hers. This changes everything about how early she's willing to go underground. And legacy? Canon Hermione becomes minister, the reformer who proves a Muggle-born can run the institution that once sidelined her. Hermione Black's endgame is messier and more mythic. Part activist, part judge, part living proof that a pure-blood identity can be broken and rebuilt. She doesn't just pass laws, she becomes a cultural argument. Underneath, though, you still recognize her. Same ferocious intellect, same need to protect the vulnerable, same almost painful loyalty to the people she's chosen as family. The soil is different, the branches twist in new directions, but the roots, justice, love, the refusal to look away, are still Hermione. Pattern interrupt. Imagine both Hermiones standing in the same courtroom. Wand down, asked the same question. What do you owe this world? One answers as an outsider who fought her way in. The other answers as an insider who chose to burn the script. So, which one scares the old order more? Our next step is to watch how that fear shapes the war they're both trying to end. What this AU reveals about blood, upbringing, and choice. Both in different ways. And that's where this AU really bears its teeth. Because when you put Hermione Granger and Hermione Black side by side, what you're really testing is nature against nurture. The core is the same. Terrifying intelligence, a spine of steel, a heart that bruises easily and keeps going anyway. But growing up a Black means those traits get trained in a different direction. Canon Hermione weaponizes her work ethic against a world that underestimated her. Hermione Black has that same drive, but it's been praised, polished, and pointed at the targets her family chose. This isn't a story about pure blood Hermione is a different person. It's a story about how the same person learns different lessons. At Grimmauld Place, she's taught that brilliance is her birthright, that House Black is the pinnacle of wizarding achievement. So when she memorizes entire law codes at 12, no one is surprised. When she debates blood policy with Narcissa over tea, it's a training exercise, not rebellion. The intelligence is constant. The syllabus is not. But because she's a Black, the confidence that canon Hermione has to build from scratch is simply there. She walks into Hogwarts, already knowing the secret passages, already knowing the politics, already knowing that professors will hesitate before crossing a Black heir. That same determination that once dragged a Muggle-born girl through prejudice now makes a pure-blood girl terrifyingly efficient at using the system. She doesn't just know the rules. She knows who wrote them, and which cousins to owl when they get in her way. So where does choice come in? She cannot stop being a Black any more than canon Hermione could stop being Muggle-born. The tapestry is still there, her name stitched in silver thread, but she can decide what that thread ties her to. Does Black mean Bellatrix's fanaticism, or Andromeda's defection, or Sirius's jailbreak grin? Each time she hides a Muggle-born under an old family fidelius, or uses black gold to fund the DA, she's answering that question. She's saying, I didn't choose this name. I do choose what it does. That's where privilege and responsibility crash together. Growing up a Black means she starts on the winning team of a rigged game. She benefits from the very prejudices she's beginning to question. When she reads about Muggle-born expulsions in old Wizengamot records, she knows those laws protected her grandparents. When she argues with Sirius in the kitchen, the subtext is brutal. You ran from this. I am this. What do I owe the people it hurt? Hermione's arc becomes a study in complicity. It's easy to condemn injustice when you're its target. Harder when it's the reason your vault is full and your family crest opens doors. So, let's explore what it means when she uses that access to smuggle evidence to Harry, to push reforms under Kingsley, to quietly dismantle the very traditions that once protected her. Is that enough? Is reform from the inside real change, or just a prettier mask? Canon keeps insisting that love and chosen family are stronger than blood, and this timeline stress tests that claim. In this AU, it's not just a sweet idea that Harry, Ron, and the DA become Hermione's true family. It's a lifeline pulling her out of a generational riptide. Every study session in the common room, every DA meeting where Neville stammers through a shield charm, every moment where Ron makes a face at her Black voice, and she realizes she's parroting Aunt Wahlberger. Those are micro-defections, little betrayals of the script she was handed. Sirius is the most dangerous variable. To the Order, he's the reckless godfather. To Hermione, he's living proof that you can love your family and still condemn what they did. Their late-night talks in Grimmaild's faded drawing room turn into a quiet seminar on moral responsibility. He doesn't let her pretend she's innocent just because she was a child. She doesn't let him pretend running away fixed anything. Together, they sketch a third path. Neither obedient heir nor exiled runaway, but a Black who stays and changes what the name means. And here's the uncomfortable mirror this AU holds up to canon. If Hermione's values can be bent this far by her upbringing, whose couldn't? What if Draco had grown up in the Burrow? What if Snape had been taken in by the Potters? Or if Neville had been raised under the Black motto instead of the Longbottom greenhouse? This changes everything because it forces us to ask how many villains and heroes in the original timeline are simply the products of who loved them, who feared them, and who taught them what power was for. So when Hermione Black stands in that courtroom and chooses who benefits from House Black's influence, She isn't just rewriting her own story, she's quietly indicting a world that decided blood would decide everything. Our next move is to watch what happens when war makes that question inescapable. For her, for Draco, and for a wizarding Britain that suddenly has to decide what and who is worth protecting. Micro, what-ifs, sorting, pairings, and side characters in a Black-dominated timeline. War makes the question inescapable. But under the surface, the really dangerous shifts are smaller, quieter. They live in the sorting hat's pause, in who sits next to whom at breakfast, in who dares to pass a note to Hermione Black when Draco Malfoy is watching. So, let's explore the micro what-ifs. What if the hat had listened when 11-year-old Hermione Black hissed, almost defensively, that of course she'd do well in Slytherin? In that timeline, she walks to the green and silver table to polite, assessing applause. Draco relaxes for the first time all evening. The Heir of Black is where she belongs. This changes everything about the DA. There is no Gryffindor know-it-all organizing resistance from the common room. There is a Slytherin prefect, 2 years later, quietly redirecting first years away from Carrow detentions and slipping contraband defensive texts into the dungeons. In Slytherin, Draco's arc bends earlier. He grows up with a cousin who can out-argue Snape and out-duel most 7th years by 4th year. Means he spends less time peacocking for Crabbe and Goyle, more time trying not to lose face in front of Hermione. When she starts questioning blood dogma, she doesn't do it from across the hall. She does it at the Slytherin table, over pumpkin juice in front of half the house. But what if the hat had gone with Ravenclaw instead? Hermione Black at the Eagle table is a different problem. She's still a Black, still a pureblood princess with a family tapestry in her childhood nightmares. But now she's surrounded by students who care more about ideas than surnames. The DA becomes a Ravenclaw-led study group first, a resistance cell second. She drafts the curriculum, Luna brings the unorthodox spells, and Harry has to get used to the brightest witch in the year vanishing into the library tower with stacks of cursed genealogy records. This isn't a story about changing her house just for novelty. It's about how each sorting choice rewires alliances. A Slytherin Hermione makes it harder for Gryffindors to dismiss the entire house as evil. A Ravenclaw Hermione pulls the intellectual center of the war out of Gryffindor Tower and into a place where Terry Boot is suddenly important. Then there's romance. What does it mean when the last Black heir dates a Weasley? In canon, Ron's insecurities are about money and brains. Here, they're about blood and politics. Dating Hermione Black means walking into every pureblood drawing room as the boy who stole an heiress from half the sacred 28. Molly worries for his safety. Arthur worries about ministry fallout. Ron worries he'll never quite understand the weight she carries when she says, casually, that Aunt Bellatrix is back. Victor Crumb. In this timeline, taking Hermione to the Yule Ball isn't just a Quidditch star courting a Muggle-born. It's an international player escorting British nobility. Bulgarian newspapers speculate about alliances. Rita Skeeter foams at the mouth. Hermione, who just wanted to dance and maybe talk about runes, discovers that every crush is a headline. Pattern interrupt. Imagine Neville Longbottom watching all of this from the edge of the hall. Neville, raised by a proud, pureblood family that still remembers what the Blacks were, sees Hermione stand up in the DA and teach shield charms to Muggle-borns. It doesn't just reassure him, it licenses him. If a Black can openly side with blood traitors, then the Longbottoms aren't isolated eccentrics, they're part of a visible faction. Augusta starts inviting Andromeda Tonks to tea again. Ginny grows up watching Hermione weaponize her surname on behalf of girls who arrived at Hogwarts in second-hand robes. Luna, who has never cared about blood, treats Hermione's title as an oddity, not a destiny, and that indifference is its own quiet rebellion. Other purebloods notice. The Pruetts, the Boneses, the scattered branches of families that went quiet after Voldemort's first rise, all have to recalibrate when a Black stands in public beside Harry Potter and a Weasley and says, calmly, that Muggle-borns are her people. But because she is a Black, that declaration doesn't just comfort the marginalized, it frightens the old guard. If the House of Black can defect, who's next? These are the pressure points where this timeline fractures into 1,000 sub-stories. Does Slytherin Hermione smuggle first years into the Room of Requirement? Does Ravenclaw Hermione publish a post-war manifesto on blood and law? Does Ron choose to marry into House Black, knowing it ties his children to a name etched under both dark marks and order medals? The beauty of this AU is that every small choice she makes radiates outward. We've traced some of the big arcs. Next, we'll follow one of those branches all the way through the war and see what happens when Hermione Black has to decide not just who she is, but what her house will be remembered for. Closing the loop. Back to the library at Grimmauld Place. So, let's explore what it means to close the loop on this Hermione Black timeline. We began in a dim library at 12 Grimmauld Place, with a small girl pressed between shelves, reading in stolen light, while portraits whispered about blood and duty. Now we come back to that same address on a different evening, and at first glance, you might think we've slipped into the wrong story. Because Grimmauld Place is bright. The curtains are open, the walls have been stripped of mildew and dark artifacts. The library doors stand wide, and instead of being a mausoleum for one decaying family, the house hums with the low roar of a school or refuge. You can hear it in the distance, a first-year Muggle-born asking if the staircase really moves, a harried tutor explaining why you do not test stunning spells on your classmates. This changes everything about what 12 Grimmauld Place means. Hermione sits in the library again, but the posture is different. She's not curled in on herself, hiding a Muggle book behind an approved genealogy. She's at the head of a long table, quills and parchment spread around her, reviewing lesson plans for Introduction to Wizarding Law for Muggle-born families. The chair she chose used to belong to her grandfather. She didn't pick it for the symbolism. She picked it because it has the best sightline to the door. The portraits that once whispered slurs when she turned pages are no longer an all-powerful chorus. Some have been removed entirely, their frames stacked in a back room for historians to argue over. Others remain, but they've been disrupted. A young Black cousin rolls his eyes as Great-Aunt Elidora complains about tainted blood, and fires back, "You do realize Hermione Black defeated 3 Death Eaters before breakfast, right?" In another frame, a Muggle-born healer in borrowed black robes calmly corrects an ancestor on the actual survival rates of impure children. The result isn't silence, it's argument. It's education as combat sport. And Hermione, passing beneath them with an armful of books, doesn't flinch. She corrects a date here, a legal citation there, almost absent-mindedly. This isn't a story about erasing the past. It's about refusing to let it have the last word. Canon gave us burns and gaps. This version keeps the scars, but writes over them. New names have been added in different inks and hands. Muggle-borns, half-bloods, adopted war orphans, even a few goblin and centaur sigils carefully negotiated over several very tense meetings. Beside her own name, the gold thread doesn't say Heiress. It reads Regent. And, in smaller script, of those who chose, she traces the paths that might have been. Sirius, who ran. Bellatrix, who bargained. So many roads branching from the same roots means she can see exactly how close she came to being the Dark Lord's sharpest blade instead of his undoing. What if one teacher had been crueler? What if one friend had been less patient? The timeline wobbles in her mind, a web of almosts. A clock chimes. Somewhere, a student yelps as a spell backfires into harmless pink smoke. Hermione closes the book in front of her, not to hide it from watching eyes, but because there's work to do outside these shelves. She stands, tucks her wand away, and steps out of the library that raised her in fear, now repurposed as the engine of her rebellion. The door swings shut behind her on a house that no longer imprisons its heirs. Next, we'll see what happens when this reimagined House Black has to hold the line in open war, and whether the world is ready for the future Hermione is already writing into its walls. You continued the story. Hermione Black's footsteps fade down the corridor, but the story doesn't stop when the library door closes. If anything, this is where the timeline starts to fracture into a dozen different futures, all tugging at her sleeves. So let's explore what you do with her next. Picture her first full Wizengamot session after the war. The ancient chamber, the golden scales, the same seats where her ancestors voted to criminalize Muggle-borns. Now Hermione Black stands there in sober black, family crest pinned over a dress stitched by a Muggle-born tailor she insisted be paid triple. Does she open by naming the dead? Does she read out the old blood purity decrees and then calmly move to repeal them one by one? Or does she lose her temper just once when an old pure blood sneers that she's betraying her house in front of the entire wizarding world? This isn't a story about easy catharsis where everyone claps and prejudice dissolves overnight. Because while she's speaking for Muggle-borns, every Muggle-born in the balcony is watching her and thinking, how do we feel about being defended by a Black? Do they trust her? Or does that name sting every time it echoes through the chamber? Does she have to earn them the way she once had to earn Harry and Ron? And what about the Blacks who survived? Maybe Narcissa sends carefully worded letters, all courtesy and no apology. Maybe Andromeda offers tea, and Tonks cracks a joke about the reformed Black Brigade before knocking over a sugar bowl. Does Hermione ever manage a real reconciliation with any of them? Or is the best she can do a polite, armed truce at the edge of family portraits that still scream about blood traitors? Then there's Hogwarts. Imagine third years whispering as Professor Hermione Black strides into a guest lecture on magical lore, her reputation arriving 10 seconds before she does. Does she terrify them into doing their reading? Or does she end up mentoring some anxious Muggle-born who can't quite believe a Black is the one teaching them how to protect themselves? Growing up in that house means she knows exactly which slurs to dismantle and which traditions to twist until they point the other way. And we haven't even touched the big what-ifs. What if she'd taken the hats off her and gone Slytherin, sitting beside Draco with the whole table watching to see which way the black air breaks? What if she'd stayed loyal to the family longer, pushing Harry away until it was almost too late? What if she'd gone into the ministry straight out of Hogwarts, trading the Horcrux hunt for committee rooms and quills, trying to strangle Voldemort's support in paperwork instead of in the forest? Each of those choices changes the moral calculus of the whole story. This changes everything about who gets hurt, who gets saved, and what it costs Hermione to drag her house into the light. That's where you come in. Fan fiction can follow Slytherin, Hermione Black through a very different Battle of Hogwarts. Fan art can put her in Wizengamot robes or on the Black family tree with half the branches burned out and new ones inked in by hand. Meta threads can argue about whether defending Muggle-borns as a Black is allyship, penance, or both. Use this AU as a lens. Go back to canon and rewatch every moment Hermione stands up to Snape, or frees the house elves, or wipes her parents' memories. But imagine the black crest on her robes while she does it. How does it change the way McGonagall looks at her? How does it change the way Draco flinches? Because once you let Hermione Black step out of that library, the next move is yours. And the question isn't just what she does in the war, it's what happens when the child of the House of Black starts raising the next generation. And one of those children asks her whether the Blacks were ever the villains. What does she tell them? Reflecting on canon, why Hermione works so powerfully as a Muggle-born, maybe the most important thing this AU does is send us back to canon Hermione with new eyes. Because when you watch Hermione Black wrestle with what to tell that future child, you remember that the original Hermione never had to explain whether her family were the villains. She had to explain why she was considered one. This isn't a story about replacing that girl. It's a story about holding her up to the light from a different angle. Canon Hermione Granger is Muggle-born for a reason. That status isn't a trivia fact on a character sheet, it's the engine of how she moves through the wizarding world. She is a bridge between worlds and, just as importantly, a critic standing on that bridge, looking both ways and asking, why is it built like this? What if she'd grown up in Grimmauld Place instead of a dentist's semi-detached? In canon, Hermione walks into Hogwarts with no inherited script about blood, house honor, or who deserves a wand. Means she questions everything much faster than almost any pure blood around her. She's the one who reads Hogwarts, a history, and then immediately asks why the house elves don't have any rights. She's the one who hears mudblood once and decides the entire system is rotten. Hermione Black, by contrast, spends whole chapters unlearning what canon Hermione never believed in the first place. Every time she flinches at shaking a Muggle-born's hand, or instinctively defends the Blacks in front of McGonagall, it throws into relief how radical Hermione Granger's default settings are. The AU shows us internalized prejudice slowly cracking. Canon shows us external prejudice slamming into a girl who refuses to crack at all. And there's the symbolism. In this timeline, making Hermione a Black gives her power on parchment, vaults, name, influence. In canon, the power of the brightest witch of her age comes from the one place Wizarding Britain insists should mean nothing: a non-magical middle-class home with parents who think charms is something you learn in a brochure. That matters. Watching a Muggle-born girl outpace purebloods who sneer at her existence is the point. She's not meant to belong easily. She's meant to excel anyway. Pattern interrupt. Imagine SPEW with Hermione Black. It becomes a daring rebellion against her own table at Christmas. But because canon Hermione is Muggle-born, SPEW isn't treason against family. It's empathy extended from the experience of being dehumanized. That shift changes everything about how we read her stubbornness. So, let's explore what this AU really gives us. It doesn't argue that Hermione would have been better as a pure blood. It argues that by watching her struggle under the weight of the Black legacy, we better understand how heavy the weight of wizarding prejudice already was in the original story. The AU is a thought experiment, not a replacement. It sends us back to the canon timeline, with more respect for the girl who had no ancient house behind her, only books, bravery, and 2 bewildered dentists who loved her enough to let her go. And once you feel that difference, the next question is obvious. If Hermione Black survives the war with her conscience intact, what does she build that Hermione Granger never could? Your turn. Sorting Hermione Black and shaping the next what if. If Hermione Black walks out of this war with a wand in her hand and blood on her robes, The next step in this timeline belongs to you. Because once we've broken canon this hard, the real question isn't just what happens, but what feels true for the version of her you've been building in your head. So, let's explore. In your version of this AU, where does the Sorting Hat put her? Is she the Slytherin princess of Grimmauld Place, trading barbs with Draco at the high table while secretly hoarding Muggle novels under her pillow? Is she the razor-sharp Ravenclaw heir, dueling pure-blood rhetoric in the library and winning by footnote? Or does she still wrench the hat's brim toward Gryffindor, choosing the house that terrifies her parents because it feels most like freedom? Tell me not just the house, but the argument she makes in that whispered minute on the stool. Then there's the moment she breaks. For you, where is Hermione Black's true turning point away from her family's creed? Is it first year, standing in front of a bathroom troll, and realizing Harry and Ron would die for a girl the Blacks would disown? Is it third year, seeing Sirius not as the disgrace in the tapestry, but as the godfather who chose found family over blood? Is it the quill digging into her hand under Umbridge, when I Must Not Tell Lies collides with a childhood of elegant, poisonous ones? Maybe it's Malfoy Manor, Bellatrix's wand on her skin, and the horrible recognition that this is who she was meant to become. Or something quieter, a house elf's eyes in the kitchen at Grimmauld, a Muggle-born classmate flinching at a slur she doesn't stop in time. Where does your Hermione say, "no more"? And once she says it, what's her political endgame? This isn't a story about redemption that fades after the epilogue. Does she fight her way into the ministry and become Minister for Magic, weaponizing the Black name to dismantle the system that raised her? Does she become a reforming judge in Wizengamot Purple, turning precedent into a shield for those her parents called mudbloods? Does she retreat to Hogwarts as a professor, rebuilding the curriculum from the ground up so the next generation never learns to hate themselves or their neighbors in the first place? Or does she step entirely outside the ministry timeline, founding a cross-border coalition, a magical NGO, something that makes Shacklebolt's government look cautious? While you're there, pitch me the next pure-blood what-if. What if Harry had been a pure-blood Potter heir, growing up in an echoing manor with portraits instead of Weasleys? What if Draco was Muggle-born, all ambition and no safety net, chasing Slytherin prestige from the bottom? What if Snape had been raised at the Burrow, learning love and second chances before dark arts and resentment? Or throw me something wilder that still reveals a new angle on the canon story, because in the end, this changes everything and nothing at once. Hermione Granger or Hermione Black, canon timeline or wild AU, who we are isn't only forged by where we come from, it's forged by who we choose to stand with when it matters most, and who we refuse to become. If you want more deep dive what-ifs, more broken timelines held together by love and hard choices, hit subscribe, follow, and tell me which world we should walk into next.